understand it's late night, but we are dealing with Congress in session to vote on the beautiful big bill that President Trump wants us to pass so that they can send funds and have money to supply the Pentagon.
Here we go.
And that beautiful Golden Dome's satellite system. And here we go.
Nice.
Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have remaining?
Gentlelady has 9 minutes remaining.
Perfect. So, Mr. Speaker, the providing tax cuts for the wealthy. Well, let's just talk about that. The House is
Gentlelady will suspend.
no tax on tips, no tax on for seniors on Social Security. This will protect the largest tax families in American history.
Suspend. Gentlelady's recognized.
Americans will see a double-digit % decrease in their taxes in districts, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady will suspend. The House is not in order.
About the second
Gentlelady's
district of
recognized.
Massachusetts, Mr. Speaker, under which it is home to 530 taxpayers. The average taxpayer in Massachusetts' second district would see if the Trump tax cuts expire, which is what my Democrat colleagues across the aisle are fighting for. A family of four making $95,495 in the Massachusetts would see a $2,141 tax increase if the Trump tax cuts expire. 10 weeks worth of groceries for a typical family of four in that region. Now let's speak about SNAP benefits. Only Democrats would protect error rates in SNAP benefit program as a cut, but this is ensuring that benefits are available to the people who are most. Anything else is fraud. Republicans are ensuring that SNAP protects the program's long-term stability, requiring cost sharing for states feasible. We are also, we are focusing on protecting people across the board. That's what we're trying to do here, Mr. Speaker. Anything else that we must continue so the House can begin our consideration of this historic legislation. I urge our members to vote yes on the question, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. All time for debate has expired. The question is, will the House now consider the resolution? Those in favor, those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
The question of the yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will. A sufficient number have. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
I apologize, patriots and civilized citizens. The equipment I'm using is quite old, so the video is jumping. I do apologize. If I get enough subscribers, I will update my equipment so that I could give our king and leader of the free world, President Trump, the respect that he deserves. So I do apologize again. Please bear with me till I'm able to get some better equipment. Thank you.
Review of final rule reclassification of major sources as area sources under Section 112 of the Clean Air Act.
The question is on passage of the joint resolution. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
voters voted. Any member wants to change their vote?
On this vote, the yeas are 216, the nays are 212. The joint resolution without it is adopted. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I offer a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution. Clerk will suspend for a moment. House will be in order. Members, please take conversations from the floor. Clerk will read the resolution.
House Resolution 435, resolved that the House has heard with profound sorrow of the death of the Honorable Gerald E. Connolly, a representative from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Resolved that the clerk communicate these resolutions to the Senate and transmit a copy thereof to the family of the deceased. Resolved that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn as a further mark of respect to the memory of the deceased.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to and the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Who are we going to first? For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Arrington, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 436, I call up Bill H.R. 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 78, H.R. 1, a bill to provide for reconciliation pursuant to Title II of House Concurrent Resolution 14.
Pursuant to House Resolution 436, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of the Rules Committee Print 119-3 modified by the amendment printed in House Report 119-113 is adopted and the bill as amended is considered read. The bill as amended shall be debatable for 2 hours, equally divided among and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Budget, on their respective designees, and the chair and ranking minority member on the Committee of Ways and Means or their respective designees. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Arrington, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Boyle, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Smith, and the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Neal, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 1.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, for the last 4 years, the American people have suffered one self-inflicted crisis after another, from the chaos at our southern border to our crime-ridden streets to a cost of living crisis that decimated working families from sea to shining sea, leaving Americans weaker, our country more divided and more vulnerable than it's been in generations. Colleagues, Lest we forget how we got here and why this moment is so important and so consequential in the life of our country, let's reflect on the recent history. Under the leadership of Biden-Harris and congressional Democrats, our federal government failed to enforce the laws of our land and unilaterally surrendered our sovereign border to terrorist drug cartels. On top of that, our military mission was reduced from warfighter readiness to ideological indoctrination. We lost the confidence of our allies, the respect of our enemies, and America's influence on the world stage. Unbridled spending and failed fiscal policies sent our country's economy into a tailspin. Trillions in deficit spending, trillions more in regulations, cradle-to-grave welfare without work, and an all-out assault on American energy independence wreaked havoc on our economy and created the worst inflation crisis in 40 years. In November, the American people gave President Trump an historic mandate and unified Republican leadership in Congress to reverse course on these failed policies and their disastrous consequences. And that's exactly what this bill does, Mr. Speaker. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act delivers the greatest single investment in border security and national defense, the largest tax cuts for families and small businesses, the most significant commitment to unlocking America's energy resources, and the largest reduction in spending in the history of the United States by twofold. But in an attempt to derail our efforts, you can be sure of this: our Democrat colleagues will use their tired old tactics of fear-mongering and false claims. They like to lead you to believe that this reconciliation bill is a, quote, tax cut for the rich on the backs of the poor. Their narrative throughout this process has not only been misleading, Mr. Speaker, and completely untrue, it preys on the fears of our nation's most vulnerable. Here's the truth. The 2017 tax cuts lowers tax rates for every American household at every income level, with the lower income families benefiting the most, while actually increasing the amount of taxes paid at the top 1%. 3 out of every $4 in the Trump tax cuts didn't go to corporations, they went to individuals. Workers experienced a record 25-year wage increase. Families received an additional $5,000 in median household income, and income for the bottom 50% grew 3 times faster than the top 1%. And as a result, Mr. Speaker, a record 6 million Americans were lifted out of poverty. This won't stop our Democrat colleagues from scaring you with fallacious statements that, quote, children will go without food, seniors will be stranded without health care, and the disabled will be left to die in the streets. All of this is just a cover for what they really want to do. They want to protect health care and welfare at any cost for illegal immigrants, at the expense of hardworking taxpayers and our citizens who depend on them. And crazy enough, Mr. Speaker, they also want to abandon the common sense Clinton-era work requirements that reduce government dependency by 80%. And instead, they would trap millions of people in poverty and rob them of the dignity of work. But by the overwhelming results of this last election, it's abundantly clear the American people see through this too. And they have totally rejected the Democrats' radical agenda. Their message to Washington was clear, Mr. Speaker. They want competent leaders, common sense policies, and a commitment from all of us to put America and Americans first. Now, let's give the people what they voted for. I reserve my time.
Reserves the balance of his time, gentleman from.
Ladies and gentlemen, did you hear that? Since President Trump has been in office, his first 100 days, over 6 million people have been uplifted out of poverty into middle class. Families have received an additional $5,000 in their yearly salaries. This is a big, beautiful bill. I don't understand what's causing them so much monarchically to stop this bill from going through. It's all Democrat side. I think I saw one Republican that voted nay, and we need to find out who that Republican is. Sounds like a traitor to me.
From Pennsylvania, Mr. Boyle.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, by my calculation, I have now been up 43 of the last 45 hours, and I'm not quitting yet. And we're not quitting yet, because the stakes are just too damn high. This is one of the most significant pieces of legislation we will ever vote on. This bill will bring about the greatest loss of health care in American history. More than 6 million Americans who are currently on the Affordable Care Act will lose their health insurance if this Republican bill becomes law. More than 7 million Americans currently on Medicaid will lose their health care if this Republican bill becomes law. In fact, in total, 13.7 million Americans will lose their health care, according to the nonpartisan CBO. That's bad enough. But then, late last night, we also got confirmation from CBO that something else is in this bill. Over $500 billion worth of cuts to Medicare. All told, given the cuts to the ACA, the cuts to Medicaid, the cuts to Medicare, the largest loss of health care in American history as a result of this bill. Not even during the Great Depression did so many people lose their health care as will lose it in this bill. And there are even more cuts beyond that. Cuts to nutrition assistance programs, cuts to Head Start, cuts to other education programs. The list goes on and on. Why? To help pay for over $5 trillion worth of tax cuts, most of which that go to the top 1%. But here's the thing. As draconian as these cuts are, they actually don't even come close to paying for the size of the tax cuts. So how is the rest subsidized? With more debt financing. So much so that we have finally seen, for the first time ever, the Moody's credit agency on Friday downgrade the quality of the credit of the United States. Today, we saw more market churn. Markets are worried. Now, most ordinary Americans, most people I call as neighbors and friends back home in Northeast Philly, a very working class and middle class place, most people I know aren't paying attention to the credit agencies and what Wall Street is doing. But here's the thing. It will affect interest rates. In fact, it already is. Mortgage rates have gone back up over 7% and set to rise by more. Not just mortgage rates, auto loan rates, the rate that your credit card company charges you. At a time of increasing unaffordability in America, this bill doesn't make the situation better. It makes it far, far worse. Mr. Speaker, this is not the kind of bill that is worthy of the Congress of the United States. This is class warfare. It makes the poor poorer, the rich richer, and the middle class left behind. And again, these aren't Democratic talking points. These aren't coming from progressive organizations. Last night, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office released the distribution tables in terms of who will get what from this tax bill. They found the bottom 10% will be 4% poorer in household wealth under this bill, with most of the benefits going to the top 10% of Americans. And of that top 10%, of course, it is the top 1% that will get the most benefit of all. Robbing the poor to reward the rich. It is wrong, it is bad economics, and it is, as one Republican senator called it, morally wrong. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, just to be clear, the CBO doesn't say economic benefits. It talks about federal resources. That letter actually affirms the success of our bill. We will actually have people, because of reasonable common sense work requirements and because of prohibitions on illegal immigrants getting taxpayer-funded social services, we'll actually have people moving up and out of the welfare trap. And we won't have people siphoning off money who are not eligible, and that is success. Not to them, but success to my Republican colleagues. With that, I yield 2 minutes to my good friend from the Keystone State, our Ag Chair, Mr. G.T. Thompson.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the One Big Beautiful Bill that will halt the largest tax increase on American families, bolster our hardworking farmers and rural communities, and give President Trump the tools he needs to make America safe again. The Agriculture Committee was tasked with $230 billion in net deficit reduction. I'm proud to say we exceeded that instruction. We achieved these savings for America's taxpayers by restoring integrity to the SNAP program, reinforcing work, rooting out waste, and ending the unchecked overreach by states and the executive branch that's driven costs through the roof. SNAP is the only state-administered welfare program that does not have a cost share component. And while the federal government funds 100% of the benefit, states are tasked with operating it. The only problem? They aren't operating it well. In 2023 alone, over $13 billion in improper payments were made. That's not just a slap in the face to taxpayers, but of the needy families who rely on SNAP as well. We aren't just stopping at restoring the SNAP program to its original intent. We're also delivering big wins for rural America by shoring up the safety net for farmers and ranchers and providing critical tax relief. The One Big Beautiful Bill makes permanent and expands the Trump tax cuts. It also prevents the death tax from hitting over 2 million family farms. It locks in the small business deduction, helping 98% of American farms stay afloat. It expands immediate expensing so farmers can expense the tools that they use today to secure the harvest of tomorrow. It protects domestic biofuels from being crowded out by Chinese imports. It lowers the cost of borrowing for our farmers hit by Biden's sky-high interest. It reduces regulatory burdens on small farmers hiring seasonal workers. In short, this bill secures the safety net our farmers deserve and delivers to SNAP the accountability taxpayers demand. America's farmers, ranchers, and rural communities sent us here to fight for them, and the One Big Beautiful Bill delivers on that mandate.
Pennsylvania.
This bill will kick 404,000 people in our state of Pennsylvania off their health insurance. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, the ranking member of the Health Subcommittee on Ways and Means, Mr. Doggett.
Gentleman from Texas recognized for 1 minute.
Breaking yet another promise, Republicans are cutting Medicare by $500 billion. On October 1st of this year, every Medicare health care provider will see a 4% cut, and that will occur year after year after year as seniors try to find someone who will accept Medicare. And on January the 1st, millions of Americans who rely on the Affordable Care Act lose their access to a family physician. Medicaid for those in nursing homes, for half the babies born in my hometown of Austin, cut. Almost 14 million Americans losing their access to health care. And the new Trump school voucher sabotage plan atop state vouchers incentivizes removing students from public schools. Meanwhile, our national debt soaring by trillions from Republicans who talk fiscal responsibility, but serving their cult leader, the deficit hawks have become chicken hawks tonight in submission to Trump, the self-described king of debt, all to reward billionaires with even more tax breaks.
Mr. Chairman, I recognize my colleague, who I don't see is here. Yes, I do, right there, from Arkansas, Chairman of the House Financial Services, Mr. French Hill.
For how much time?
For 2 minutes.
For 2 minutes. Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
I rise tonight in support of this reconciliation effort, and I thank my friend from West Texas, the home of natural security, for supporting this bill and working hard to bring it to fruition, bringing it to the House floor. Last month, the House Financial Services Committee completed our work assigned to us under the Budget Committee's reconciliation instruction. The resolution asked us to decrease the deficit by $1 billion during the planning period of 10 years. Our committee exceeded that objective, and we've saved the American taxpayers and cut the deficit in our plan by $5.2 billion in savings. During the markup, we spent 9 hours debating and considering 40 amendments from our friends on the other side of the aisle. After this exhaustive process, we favorably reported our committee print to fulfill our obligations under this bill. Mr. Speaker, we can't lose sight of the reason that we're here tonight on this House floor. In 2024, the American people voted for fiscal responsibility and real change. Our country is currently $37 trillion in debt, paying billions of dollars in interest each day on that debt. Congress must act. Today, we start that process. For too long, the government spending has been a one-way road in the wrong direction. I'm proud of the work of the Financial Services Committee to do our part to reduce this deficit. I ask all my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you. I would remind my friend this bill would kick 131,000 people in Arkansas off their health insurance. With that, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Virginia, the distinguished ranking member of the Education and Workforce Committee, and also a member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Scott.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's hard to take my colleagues on the other side of the aisle seriously when they give speech after speech after speech complaining about the deficit and then support this reconciliation bill that adds trillions of dollars to the national debt. The bill also not only increases the deficit, it has 4 million students who will lose their Pell Grants, 18 million children could potentially lose their free school lunch, 13.7 million people are set to lose their health care, and everybody loses when the National Institute of Health research is cut. This big, bad billionaires bill steals educational opportunities from students, cuts health care and food from working families, all to fund tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, and then increases the national debt. Mr. Speaker, to paraphrase Harry Truman, this is not fear-mongering, it's the truth, but they just think it's fear-mongering. Vote no.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, rather, my Democrat colleagues surely recognize and remember that for the last 4 years, they racked up $8 trillion in record debt. If you add the record interest rates from the record inflation, that'd be another $5 trillion. And so I don't know that we need a whole lot more lecturing on the national debt. Our balanced budget reconciliation bill actually reduces the deficit in the 10-year window by $140 billion, and it brings the debt to GDP down by 10 percentage points. With that, I yield to my friend from Kentucky, the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Brett Guthrie.
For how much time?
For 2 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise in support of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which includes a title from Energy and Commerce that unleashes American energy, promotes American innovation, and protects care for our most vulnerable Americans. In 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson created the Medicaid program to protect low-income families, individuals who are disabled, and seniors, and House Republicans share this commitment to this vulnerable population. This bill protects coverage for those individuals by ensuring ineligible recipients do not cut the line in front of our most vulnerable Americans. The decision by left-leaning state governments to spend taxpayer dollars on people who are ineligible for the program is indefensible. Medicaid should not cover illegal immigrants, deceased or duplicative beneficiaries, or able-bodied adults without dependents who choose not to work. Let's be clear. What my Democrat colleagues are prioritizing when they say they oppose our bill, what they're really saying is 4.8 million people who refuse to work a part-time job or volunteer in their community are entitled to free health care paid by hardworking taxpayers. When they're opposed to our bill, what they're really saying is that the 1.4 million illegal immigrants should be prioritized over U.S. citizens. When they say they oppose our bill, what they're really saying is that people who aren't eligible for Medicaid should be prioritized over children, mothers, or people with disabilities for whom the program was intended. House Republicans make no apologies for prioritizing Americans in need over illegal immigrants or other able-bodied beneficiaries who are choosing not to work. Along with work requirement, our bills rolls back restrictive Biden-era regulations, promotes transparency for pharmacy benefit managers, increases seniors' access to medication. These are all common sense policies that will strengthen our health care system, return taxpayer dollars to middle-class families. House Republicans are fighting for America's children. We're fighting for pregnant women and mothers. We're fighting for individuals with disabilities, and we're fighting for seniors who need long-term care. That is why I urge my colleagues to support this legislation as part of our effort. I support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd remind my good friend that this bill will kick 159,000 people in the Commonwealth of Kentucky off their health insurance. Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Vermont, a distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Ms. Ballant.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You have to ask yourself, why? Why are we here at 3 a.m. fast-tracking this bill? Well, this bill is nothing to be proud of. It's best to pass it in the night when most folks are asleep. What kind of nation are we when leaders choose to take food away from children? What kind of nation are we when they choose to take health care away from people? When they choose to add trillions of dollars to the deficit and pass those financial handcuffs off onto our grandchildren? What kind of nation are we when they choose to make those deficits force $500 billion of cuts to Medicare? What has happened this week is shocking. It's unconscionable. It's not leadership. It's moral failure. Kicking the poor in the teeth while rewarding the richest among us. My colleagues, Americans deserve so much better than this, so much better. And I urge my colleagues to reject this cruel, cynical bill.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, 91% on average of my colleagues, voters, constituents, friends and families, they pay the standard deduction. Their opposition to this bill, if they were successful, would actually cut the standard deduction in half. And with that, I yield 2 minutes to my friend from Missouri, our T&I Chair, Mr. Graves.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of one big, beautiful bill which fulfills President Trump's agenda by securing our border, keeping taxes low for families and job creators, and restoring the nation's energy dominance and cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. The Transportation and Infrastructure Committee's portion of today's legislation combines critical investments in border security, national defense, and modernization of America's air traffic control system while eliminating wasteful spending and other deficit reduction measures. Specifically, this bill addresses long overdue needs in the United States Coast Guard, which for over 2 decades has received less than half of the capital investment necessary to effectively carry out its critical missions. The T&I Committee included more than $21 billion to recapitalize Coast Guard assets, including the acquisition of cutters, aircraft, polar icebreakers, along with the facilities that are needed to support them. In light of serious operational and financial challenges facing the FAA, the T&I Committee provided $12.5 billion down payment for finally modernizing our outdated air traffic control infrastructure. Finally, the bill addresses the chronic shortfall in the Highway Trust Fund by instituting a $250 annual fee on electric vehicles and $100 on hybrid vehicles, ensuring that all drivers contribute their fair share to maintaining our roads and bridges. In this measure, the T&I Committee prioritized core federal responsibilities, which included national defense, transportation safety, and infrastructure modernization, while also responsibly offsetting these investments with cuts to wasteful spending. Mr. Speaker, I'd urge my colleagues to support the legislation, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to correct a disingenuous argument that has been offered repeatedly. Folks on the other side, throughout this past week and a half, 2 weeks, and we hear it tonight, say, well, if we don't pass this bill, most Americans will face a tax increase. Completely false. Time and again over the last 2 weeks, both in Ways and Means and Rules, Democratic members offered amendments to protect and extend the tax cuts for every American making under $1 billion a year. Every single Democrat voted for those amendments. Every single Republican voted against them. With that, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Ohio, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Ms. Kaptur.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Ranking Member Boyle, federal budgets are moral documents. They tell the American people who we value and who we leave behind. This budget is a bonanza for billionaires. It's paid for by cutting health care and food for millions of working families and seniors. The U.S. national debt stands at $36 trillion, and this bill will raise it to over $40 trillion. Historically, Republican administrations have ballooned the debt. Reagan, both Bushes, and Trump through tax cuts to the very rich coupled with endless wars. It's clear where the debt has come from. Trillions added, unpaid. Now they're coming after health coverage and food assistance. President Trump already has added $8.4 trillion to the debt from his last tax cuts. Meanwhile, as billionaires use their tax refunds to do stock buybacks, American workers are left behind. Let's call it what it is, another Republican budget buster, betraying working people while causing prices to rise. 40,000 people across the district I represent and nearly 14 million nationwide will lose coverage for health care to pay for these bonanzas for billionaires. Mr. Speaker, this bill must be
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Vote no. Thank you, and I yield.
Mr. Speaker, I would remind my colleagues over the last 4 years, their failed economic policies, their unbridled spending put a 20% inflation, regressive inflation tax on working families all across this great land. With that, I yield to my good friend from Ohio, our GOP chair of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jim Jordan.
For how much time?
For 2 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, you know it's a good bill because the left hates it. The left that defunded the police, the left that let 10 million people illegally enter our country in a 4-year time span, the left that wants men to compete against women in sports, the left that lied to us about Benghazi, lied to us about the Hunter Biden laptop, lied to us about President Biden's health, the left that lied to us about COVID. You remember that. They got to go to the fancy restaurants, but all the people we represent, they couldn't go to church, couldn't go to work, couldn't go to school. The left doesn't like this bill. That tells you it's a good bill. This bill's about fundamental conservative principles, regular things that the American people appreciate. This bill cuts taxes. This bill requires work for able-bodied adults in our welfare system. This bill gives school choice to parents. This bill secures the border. We're the party that believes in letting moms and dads keep more of their money to spend on their goals and their dreams. We're the party that says if you get taxpayer funds and you're able-bodied, you should work. That's fair to the taxpayers. That's good for our economy. Most importantly, it's good for the recipient. We're the party that says parents, regular moms and dads, should get to pick where their kid goes to school so they can get the kind of education that will allow them to achieve the American dream. That's in this bill. And this bill secures the border. The primary issue of last fall's election, the issue that decided the election, the issue that put President Trump in the White House and Republicans in control of the Congress, this bill helps secure the border that President Trump's already got under control. That's why we should support this legislation. It cuts taxes, requires work for able-bodied adults, empowers parents to pick the school where their kid's going to get the best education, and secures the border like the American people want us to do. This bill is doing exactly what we told the voters we were going to do, and that's why we should support it. I yield back to the budget chairman and thank him for his good work on this legislation.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Well done,
I would remind the gentleman this bill will kick 404,000 people in Ohio off their health insurance. I now yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Washington, as a distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Ms. Jayapal.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is a massive betrayal of working people and poor people across America. It strips at least 14 million Americans of their health care. It slashes food for the hungry, and it cuts basic needs for Americans across the country. And why? So that you can give a $5 trillion tax break to the wealthiest billionaires like Elon Musk. If you had a giant corporate lobby outside, you get a tax break. If you're in the top 0.1%, 0.1% of billionaires, you get a $398,000 tax break. If you're a millionaire, you get an average $83,000 tax break. But if you're a working person or a poor person, you are SOL. You get kicked off your health care. You don't get the $2 a meal in SNAP benefits, and you get hungrier, you get poorer, you get sicker. And here's the thing, if you're so proud about this bill, why are we debating it at 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning? Why are these schedules getting rigged so that people don't actually get to see what we are doing here in this chamber? I yield back. I'm a hell no.
Members are reminded to direct their remarks to the chair. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I have great respect for my ranking member, but he's rattling off numbers saying this many people will come off of the welfare rolls in my colleagues' districts. Let's remind the American people, the people he's talking about are folks who are in this country illegally, or they're able to work and they're not working. They're able to work and they're not working. So, Mr. Speaker, order, Mr. Speaker.
House will be in order.
So for the record,
Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the record, they are opposing the common sense policy and what every American's expectation is at a base level, that people who are able to work. It's good for their soul. It's good for this country. It's the right policy, and they're fighting us on it. And with that, I yield to my friend and Vice Chairman of the Budget Committee from the Keystone State for 1 minute, Mr. Lloyd Smucker.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your work on this bill. Today, we are charting a bold new course for American prosperity. This bill not only builds on the pro-growth legacy of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it prevents the largest tax hike in American history. Across the country, years of inflation have taken a bite out of everyone's paycheck. Groceries, gas, housing all cost more. Americans feel left behind, and this bill is the solution. It delivers immediate relief for working families. It locks in permanent tax cuts, unleashes economic growth, and puts American workers first. We're talking about saving 6 million jobs, cutting red tape, securing our borders, and supercharging Made in America manufacturing. And we do all this while achieving historic federal savings. It is possible to reduce spending, provide tax relief, and protect core services for Americans all at once. This is real, responsible leadership. Mr. Speaker, this bill is bold, immediately effective, and above all, it's common sense. It's time to pass this act and get America back on the path to prosperity.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I have good news for my friend, the chairman of the Budget Committee. We just verified with the Congressional Budget Office, and of the 13.7 million Americans who will lose their health care because of their bill, exactly 0 are undocumented immigrants. So the complete artifice that the other side is attempting to convince you is that almost 14 million Americans will lose their health care, but don't worry about it. They're all illegals. They're all people who are defrauding the system. It's completely false, and every independent source has verified that it is false. Yay. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Ms. Chu.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise in strong opposition to the Republicans' unbelievably ugly bill. This bill is worse than we thought. By ripping Medicaid and food assistance away from many millions of vulnerable Americans while slashing taxes for the ultra-wealthy, The nonpartisan CBO found that it would make the poorest 10% poorer while making the richest 10% richer. This bill would also increase the debt so much that it will trigger cuts to Medicare benefits by almost $500 billion. So to my Republican colleagues, think of my constituent Maria. Maria needs Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security to care for her daughter who resides in a nursing home, uses a feeding tube to eat, and can't recognize her mother. Maria asked, if Medicaid is cut, where would my daughter go? Tax cuts for the wealthiest at the expense of Maria's daughter getting the care she needs to survive is despicable. Vote no on this bill.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, according to Numbers USA, over the last 4 years when the Democrats were in charge of this town, and millions of people were flooding into this country from across. We were spending $9,000 per illegal immigrant on social services, taxpayer-funded social services. Mr. Speaker, that's more than we spend on our own citizens who depend on Medicaid. That's more than we spend on military benefits for our veterans. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to my friend from California and fellow Budget Committee member, Mr. Tom McClintock.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If this bill fails, an average family's taxes will rise 22% next year, about $1,700 a year, the biggest tax increase in American history. But if it succeeds, working families will be able to keep more of their earnings. We'll be able to complete the border wall and protect our communities from the violent cartels the Democrats allowed into our country. We'll relieve pressure on Medicaid by requiring able-bodied adults on it to look for work. And we can free up America's vast energy resources. You know, the most important economic indicator is how Americans answer this question next year. Are you better off today than you were 2 years ago? By this time next year, Americans could be enjoying one of the most explosive periods of growth in our history, and all that means: secure borders, safer communities, lower taxes, abundant energy, more and better jobs, a higher standard of living, and a better quality of life. A big, beautiful future for all Americans. I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I would remind the gentleman that this bill would kick 1.98 million people in California off their health insurance. I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Tonko.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. One of the very first bills I ever voted on as a representative in Congress was passing the Affordable Care Act and bringing historic access to health care to millions. That action reflects what Congress should be all about: helping everyday Americans, serving our communities, and fighting against the forces that seek to make us sicker, hungrier, and poorer. Unfortunately, today, those forces are the Republican majority, the President of the United States, and the richest people on the planet. On top of constitutional crises, in the throes of a housing and cost of living emergency, and in the face of catastrophic climate change, Congress is set to make the largest cuts to health care, food assistance, and environmental protections in American history. Families in my district and across our country are hurting. You don't fix that pain by further ripping away the basic needs programs that help those struggling to get by. For me, the choice is clear. I will never stop fighting for my constituents and all Americans whose lives will be destroyed by this monstrosity of a bill. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield a minute to my fellow Texan, Mr. Gill, who's also on the Budget Committee.
The gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, so much of what we have heard tonight from the other side of the aisle is nothing but shrill and hysterical calumny from a political party who has nothing to offer the American people but confiscatory taxes, open borders, and men and women's sports. They talk about cruelty, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you what is cruel. Cruelty is deliberately facilitating the mass importation of millions of illegal aliens, many of whom are murdering and raping and pillaging our people on our soil. Mr. Speaker, this bill will fund border security, it will fund ICE, and it will fund the largest deportation operation in American history. Mr. Speaker, we are taking our country back, and for that I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Well, you're really cheery, aren't you? The reality is this bill, not according to our numbers, according to the independent, certified, nonpartisan authority on this matter, verified at least 13.7 million Americans will lose their health insurance. And you know why they want to talk about every subject under the sun other than this? Because they know it is going to have devastating consequences for the American people, and it will have devastating consequences for them next November. With that, I'm happy to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Kentucky, distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Mr. McGarvey.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 13.7 million Americans will lose their health care. We're going to gut America's premier anti-hunger program. It's going to add trillions of dollars to the nation's debt. You don't believe me? The Congressional Budget Office says it. My colleagues, Mr. Schweikert, Mr. Roy, Mr. Massey, they all say this is going to add to the debt and to the deficit of this country. And for what?
All right, welcome back.
So Donald Trump's small circle of billionaire donors get a tax break.
12 minutes.
So we know who it helps.
Give it to you.
But let's talk about who it hurts.
As the thumbnail says, no
40% of the people who get Medicaid in this country are children.
Kamala Harris.
That's whose health care we're taking away.
I want to give them a slow
Those
clap.
kids who rely on this for life-saving care, they're the ones, like my constituent, June, who has quadriplegic cerebral palsy. Let's talk about who it hurts. She's had 3 spinal cord surgeries in the last month. This enables her to stay at home with her family and to have a life. It will hurt children across this country. We shouldn't do it. We should vote no. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Rhode Island, a distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Amo.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, budgets are a statement of values, and Republicans have made their values crystal clear. They value those who can buy crystals over the working class. They value putting the needs of the wealthy few over the vulnerable. They value making the rich richer, the sick sicker, the hungry hungrier, and yes, the poor poorer. It's a moral inversion, a reverse Robin Hood scheme to steal from the poor and give to the rich, and it is just plain wrong. This big, bad bill is an abomination that will hurt tens of thousands of Rhode Islanders just to give billionaires a break on their taxes. Republicans have made their values clear, so will I. My Rhode Island values are healing the sick, feeding the hungry, and uplifting the poor, ensuring that there is opportunity in this country for everyone, especially the working people in the middle class. You have my word that I will never stop fighting for vulnerable Rhode Islanders and against this dangerous bill. And if I thought they had it, I'd urge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to show some backbone and do the same. But I know they will fall in line. I yield back.
I agree with the gentleman. The budgets do reflect values, the values of the Republican Party, and my colleagues are to protect 40 million families from having their child tax credit cut in half, 26 million small businesses who would have the highest marginal rates. They'd lose the 20% deduction, 2 million family-owned farms, and the farming families would have the death tax exemption slashed in half. Mr. Speaker, those are our values. We want people to keep more of their money. We want this economy to grow. We want people to have better opportunities and bigger paychecks. We want to give folks hope for a better life to come up and out of poverty, out of welfare, and put their God-given talents to use. So with that, my dear friend, from Georgia and fellow member of the Budget Committee. I would like to yield a minute to Mr. Buddy Carter.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. The American people are suffering. They're suffering from 4 years of government overreach and out-of-control spending that has put us on the edge of fiscal ruin. That stops now. This bill will make President Trump's tax cuts for American families permanent, remove taxes on tips and overtime, unleash American energy dominance, and eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse from key federal programs. Passing this bill means preserving Medicaid for generations to come, and keeping our promise to ensure it's there for Americans who truly need it. This bill will allow families still feeling the pain of inflation to take home tax-free tips and hard-earned overtime. This bill will rein in out-of-control spending by government agencies such as EPA that had little or no oversight under President Biden. Let me be clear. This is a bill that works for America. It will put us back to the path towards fiscal responsibility, keep money in the pocket of those Americans, unleash American energy dominance, and preserve key programs for those who need them.
Gentleman's time is expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Well done, buddy.
Mr. Speaker, this bill will kick 494,000 people in Georgia off their health insurance. I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Washington State, the distinguished ranking member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Mr. Larson.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, Transportation and Infrastructure Committee Democrats are for bills that invest in job-creating infrastructure. We are against jamming through fiscally reckless bills that rip health care away from 13 million Americans and take food assistance away from millions of families so that we can hand out tax breaks to billionaires. Democrats want to continue historic funding for transportation infrastructure and stronger and healthier communities. Unfortunately, this reconciliation package leaves very little room for those investments. To make the needed safety investments for the entire air traffic control system, the safety investments that we need to tackle the highway safety crisis, the investments that we need to meet the Coast Guard members' health care, housing, and child care needs. And this bill causes immediate harm by yanking money from locally selected projects that our constituents in Republican and Democratic districts alike are counting on. And for what? To help pay for the tax cuts for the richest Americans and largest corporations. I look forward to a future where the members of this body work together on priorities for transportation infrastructure, but this big, ugly bill ain't it.
Gentleman from Texas.
I reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Maryland, the distinguished ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Raskin.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's telling that President Trump and his cult followers have chosen to name their bill after its size and its looks instead of its contents and its values. They don't want anybody looking inside this monstrosity. There's nothing beautiful or big about stripping 14 million Americans of their health care or removing food security from 11 million people, including 4 million kids. That's ugly. That's small. I know Donald Trump has increased his net worth by more than $3 billion since taking office from his global crypto scam, and that yesterday he brought home a $400 million jumbo jet from the monarch dictator of Qatar, a flying constitutional violation packed with threats of espionage and surveillance. But there's nothing big or beautiful about plundering the wealth of the people of America to give to the people who have already profited from Donald Trump's prior schemes. Let's vote this whole monstrosity down.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what's big. The $900 billion in tax breaks, special interest tax breaks to green energy corporations that my colleagues passed unilaterally in the, quote, Inflation Reduction Act. That's big. And so the billionaires that got rich off their tax breaks got a big break. And we aim to phase them out or repeal them so we could bring the energy costs down, so we can strengthen America's energy independence. With that, I'd like to yield a minute to my friend from Indiana, Mr. Marlin Stutzman.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman. I rise in strong support for H.R. 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Despite the claims from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, this bill will give huge benefits to everyday working Americans in all of our districts. This bill includes many tax benefits, including a Made in America auto tax break, which will not only support American families trying to buy a car, but it will further support new jobs in manufacturing facilities like General Motors and Toyota in Indiana. On top of this, the One Big Beautiful Bill supports building America's Golden Dome defense system, securing the homeland, and bolstering America's capabilities that will start with the skilled workforce in my district in Northeast Indiana. This bill also puts money back into working Americans' pockets. It supports those who work tirelessly in restaurants and supports nurses and factory workers who work overtime to support their families by establishing no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. This bill supports every American from small business owners to hourly wage workers and propels America's economic performance. I urge all of my colleagues to vote in favor of this bill.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Sure, one challenge with doing this massive bill, literally in the middle of the night, as I look up, it's 3:40, if I'm reading that correctly, it's 3:45 a.m. right now. And there are all sorts of provisions that we're discovering in this massive piece of legislation being rushed through in the dead of the night. So I want to call out just one deeply troubling provision hidden in this bill, a provision that blocks states from regulating artificial intelligence for the next 10 years. AI has the potential to be transformative, but only if it's developed and used in a safe, responsible way. That requires strong guardrails. This bill does the opposite. And the fact this was quietly tucked into this budget bill, it's reckless and it's wrong. And it shows exactly who this bill was written for. Not working families, but powerful special interests. With that, I yield now 1 minute to the gentleman from California, the ranking member of the Veterans Affairs Committee, Mr. Takano.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this big billionaire payout. We are voting in the dead of night, out of sight of the American people, because the Republican majority knows that the public will be outraged after they find out what is in this bill. It strips health insurance from nearly 14 million people across the country. It puts 11 million people on food assistance at risk of hunger. It increases the deficit by $2.3 trillion. And for what? To give billionaires a tax break. But don't just take my word for it. The independent data crunchers at the Congressional Budget Office found that the richest 10% of Americans would see their incomes go up, while the poorest 10% would see theirs go down. This bill is reverse Robin Hood. It takes from the poor and gives to the rich. I urge my colleagues to reject this shameful bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Texas.
One of the problems, Mr. Speaker, with the work requirements in the Supplemental Nutrition Program, and I'm sure Mr. Takano knows this, is that states have been allowed to game the system and not effectively enforce those for those able-bodied adults receiving services. And in California, in fact, nobody is working who is on food stamps who is able to work. Nobody is working. And so it's not fair to those people. It's not fair to rob them of the dignity of work. It's not fair in our fiduciary role to the taxpayer. So, Mr. Speaker, we're turning this ship around, and we're cleaning the mess up here in Washington, and we're putting the incentives in place that will do well by everybody involved. And with that, I'd like to yield a minute to my friend from the Keystone State, Mr. John Joyce.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you for yielding. I rise in strong support of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This important legislation will strengthen Medicaid by cutting waste, fraud, and abuse to ensure that the most vulnerable Americans have access to the critical services on which they rely. Pregnant women, children, seniors, and disabled Americans who need and deserve Medicaid benefits, not illegal immigrants or able-bodied adults simply choosing not to work. This bill also fixes a provision in the Inflation Reduction Act to ensure that new innovative therapies for rare diseases are brought to market, restoring the hope of future cures for millions of Americans. In November, the American people sent a clear message with the election of President Donald Trump. Now, it is our job in Congress to deliver this one big, beautiful bill and produce results for the American people. I encourage all of my colleagues to support this legislation. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Well, I would remind my friend from the great state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, this bill will kick 404,000 people in our state off their health insurance. I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, a distinguished member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Dr. Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
I have a question for Republicans who are, in the cover of night, forcing this one big, ugly bill on working families. What the hell is wrong with you? You're taking away over $300 billion of food from the mouths of millions of hungry children, seniors, and veterans. You're taking away health care from over 14 million people by cutting Medicaid by nearly $800 billion. And despite these and many more cuts to working families, you're raising the debt by more than $5 trillion? For what? To give billions of dollars in tax cuts to billionaires like Elon Musk? What the hell is wrong with you? The millions of uninsured will be millions of uncompensated care for hospitals that rely on Medicaid. Hospitals will cost more, cut services like pediatrics, maternal health, and labor and delivery, and many will close. Premiums will rise and cost more. Whether you have private insurance or Medicaid, if your community hospital closes, where the hell will you get your constituents' care?
Gentleman's time has expired, and members are again reminded to address their remarks to the chair. Gentleman from Texas.
I thank the Speaker. Yield 1 minute to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Russell Fry.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The one big, beautiful bill is exactly what this country needs. It is bold, it is clear, it is packed with real solutions. While Democrats have buried their head in the sand on the biggest issues facing America, Republicans are stepping up. They ignore the border crisis while towns are overrun. They downplay inflation while families can't afford groceries. And they pretend crime isn't skyrocketing while our cities become war zones. Democrats would rather police your speech than protect your streets. They'll rush to ban plastic straws, but look the other way when fentanyl overruns our cities. And when parents speak up at school board meetings, they get labeled as extremists, while actual criminals walk free. The One Big Beautiful Bill does exactly what they want. It secures the border, protects our communities, strengthens our economy, cuts taxes, cuts waste, unleashes American energy, and puts the American people first. No more excuses. No more distractions. It's time to fix what is broken, and this bill is the blueprint.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Would remind the gentleman this bill will kick 220,000 people in South Carolina off their health insurance. I now yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, distinguished member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Ms. Trahan.
Thank you. Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I oppose this bill because it is a targeted attack on Planned Parenthood, one of the most trusted providers of reproductive health care in our country. The bill bans federal Medicaid and CHIP dollars from going to Planned Parenthood for 10 years, without even naming the organization by using vague criteria clearly designed to single them out. This provision threatens access to cancer screenings, birth control, and other essential care for millions of Americans, particularly low-income women. For this reason, at the appropriate time, I will offer a motion to recommit this bill back to the committee. If the House rules permitted, I would have offered the motion with an important amendment to this bill. My amendment would strike the provision that blocks Medicaid reimbursements to Planned Parenthood because no one should lose access to basic care just because of where they go to get it. I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the text of this amendment.
Without objection.
I hope my colleagues will join me in voting for this motion to recommit, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield a minute to the gentleman from Michigan, my good friend, Mr. Tim Walberg, who is also the chairman of the Education and Workforce Committee.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hear a lot of hyperbole today, and of course we understand the louder you speak, the more fear you produce in people and ultimate power that you have over them. As chair of the Education Workforce Committee, I'm concerned, though, as young people are going to college and universities and trying to lift themselves up, we find another challenge that goes on with big government and the control through student debt. The Education and Workforce Committee's portion of the big, beautiful bill delivers the kind of accountability students need and our economy demands. The bill saves taxpayers almost $350 billion. It also streamlines loan repayment options, making it easier for borrowers to repay while also targeting assistance to those who actually need it. By curbing excessive student loan debt and holding colleges accountable, this legislation also puts an end to colleges hiking tuition and spending recklessly. Simply put, it provides schools with an incentive to deliver real value for students and taxpayers. The American people want this. Let's support this bill and make America free.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I would remind the gentleman this bill will kick 372,000 people in Michigan off their health insurance. I yield now 1 minute to the gentleman from Maryland, distinguished member of the Small Business Committee, Mr. Olszewski.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, there is nothing beautiful about this bill, but the deficit growth, at least, is big. Maybe that's why my Republican colleagues are debating it under the cloak of darkness again. This bill is ugly. The bill is a scam. The nonpartisan CBO has confirmed that under the bill, the poor will get poorer and the rich will get richer. And to fund tax breaks for the wealthy, the bill borrows trillions while taking away food from hungry kids and health care away from hardworking Americans. My amendment to address the hypocrisy of Medicaid work requirements imposed under this bill was not included. The amendment was simple. Before prying health care away from able-bodied constituents, make sure they actually have access to a job. 14,000 will lose Medicaid coverage in my district alone. Thousands more will see their premiums soar. 20,000 who rely on SNAP for their next meal could go hungry. Nationwide, it's millions. It does nothing to lower costs for average Americans. It does the exact opposite. This bill is cruel. We should all vote no. And I yield.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think it's a scam to prevent a 22% tax hike on average Americans. Let's be clear. My colleagues and I don't think it's a scam to steward tax dollars and root out waste, fraud, and abuse across the people's government. We don't think it's a scam to prohibit people who are not citizens of our country from draining the social safety net and impacting its sustainability for future vulnerable Americans. That's not a scam. That's our job, and we intend to do it. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from the Commonwealth of Virginia, distinguished member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Ms. McClellan.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
This big bag billionaire bonus extends tax cuts for the wealthiest few at the expense of the most vulnerable Americans. It kicks millions of Americans off their health insurance and takes food out of the mouths of millions more, including children, seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. This bill will make someone who earns up to $300 a week pay up to a $35 copay because they need to have skin in the game, ignoring the fact they also have to pay their rent, childcare, utilities, on and on. This disastrous bill mandates that states implement burdensome red tape requirements and force Medicaid recipients to prove they are working, even though when given a chance to implement such requirements, only 2 states did. 18,000 working Arkansas people were kicked off because they couldn't meet the state's requirement, which are no longer in place. And Georgia spent more on administrative costs for their work requirements than on the cost of care. And once kicked off Medicaid, these people won't be eligible for subsidies to purchase marketplace plans, but they will get sick, they will go to the hospital, and the cost will go to the rest of us. This big bad bill is a bust, and I urge a vote.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield a minute to my friend from North Carolina, also Budget Committee member, Mr. Chuck Edwards.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This one big, beautiful bill delivers on two of our nation's most urgent priorities: securing our southern border and unleashing American energy independence. It invests nearly $70 billion to finish the border wall, expand surveillance technology, and to hire thousands of new border agents, giving Customs and Border Protection the tools that they finally need to stop illegal crossings, combat drug trafficking, and to protect our communities. At the same time, we're rolling back the Biden administration's reckless energy mandates and cutting red tape to expand American oil, gas, and infrastructure. By restoring the free market and prioritizing domestic production, this bill lowers costs for American families in this way also and strengthens our national security. It's just common sense. Secure the border, and power America with American energy. Let's get this done for our agents, for our workers, and for the future of this country. I yield back.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, distinguished member of the Judiciary Committee, Ms. Kamlager-Dove.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
With this backstabbing billionaire bill, House Republicans are selling their soul and constituents to the highest bidder, Donald Trump. First, he crashed the economy with his temper taxes, driving up the cost of groceries and down our credit rating with Moody's. Now Trump and Republicans want to steal even more from hardworking Americans to provide tax breaks to those who kiss the Mar-a-Lago ring. They are stealing your food, your health care, your security. My district in LA has the 4th highest Medicaid enrollment in the entire nation. 225,000 of my constituents rely on food assistance to feed their families, and nearly 1 million people in my state live in subsidized housing. My constituents call my office asking me to protect their Medicaid. They don't ask that their life-saving benefits be taken away and given to the 1%. Daylight is the best disinfectant, which is why all of their dirty deeds have been happening at night with this bill. I urge my colleagues to listen to their constituents instead of tasing them at town halls and vote against this dangerous bill. I urge America to keep the receipts on the vote.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield a minute to the gentleman from Georgia, a great champion for the Second Amendment and a good friend and Budget Committee member, Mr. Andrew Clyde.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My Democrat colleagues have challenged why the deregulation of silencers is in this bill and why are we removing the $200 tax. Well, under the law, they are firearms and therefore protected by another law enacted in 1791 called our Second Amendment of our beloved Constitution. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and neither shall it be taxed. Chief Justice John Marshall in 1819 declared that the power to tax includes the power to destroy. If you can tax it, then you can destroy it. You can raise the tax so high that almost no one can afford it, and then you really don't have a right at all. But the Second Amendment is an unalienable constitutional right, God-given, that governments are required to protect, not to tax. The Supreme Court in the Heller decision of 2008 declared the Second Amendment to be an individual constitutional right, further protecting it from taxation, just like the right to speak and the right to vote. This bill simply restores that right from over 90 years of draconian tax. My Democrat colleagues have asked, how did this get in the bill? What was the deal and who asked for it? No deal. I believe the Speaker, with the purest of motives, simply wanted to restore a constitutional right. And who asked?
Time has expired.
Me. I asked. I yield.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Speaker, perhaps it's because it's now past 4 a.m., but I feel like I've entered the twilight zone. We have 13.7 million Americans, at least, who are going to lose their health insurance because of this bill. Another $500 billion worth of cuts to Medicare on top of that. And what is one of their last speakers talking about? A tax cut if you buy silencers. This is bizarre. The reality is millions and millions of Americans are going to lose their health coverage, all to help subsidize tax cuts for billionaires. Oh, yes, and also tax cuts for those who buy gun silencers. And with that, I'm happy to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, distinguished member of the Agriculture Committee, Mr. Riley.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'm new here, but this bill confirms what I suspected. This place is corrupt as hell. My amendment would have used this opportunity to negotiate prescription drug prices. It would have saved us billions of dollars that we could have used for tax cuts for the middle class. But you know what happened? The drug companies sent their armies of lobbyists here to kill it. Because y'all are fine taking food off the tables of kids, but God forbid you would do anything to rein in the profits of the drug companies. We could have used this opportunity to close the carried interest loophole, make Wall Street finally pay its fair share. That's common sense, but you know where all that super PAC cash comes from, so you'd rather close rural hospitals than close tax loopholes. And you wonder why the American people hate this place. You really want to drain the swamp? Start by killing this bill and working across the aisle to deliver real tax cuts for the middle class instead of your handlers. I yield back.
Gentleman from Texas?
I reserve, Mr.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, we're prepared to close on this side.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it has been a long debate. I think we started, 48 hours ago or whatever it is by now. But make no mistake about it. This is not a debate that should have been happening in the middle of the night. It shouldn't have happened in the middle of the night last night in Rules Committee. Shouldn't be happening in the middle of the night tonight. Frankly, if I had a bill that I was proud of, I would want to put it on when people are most paying attention. I can understand, however, why there are some folks on the other side who might want folks to not quite pay attention to what's in this bill. You have heard speaker after speaker on this side, however, expose the damage that this bill for billionaires will do. 13.7 million Americans, at least, to lose their health insurance because of devastating cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Another $500 billion more cut in Medicare. All sorts of cuts to nutrition programs, food assistance, education programs, Head Start. The list goes on. And why? To subsidize tax cuts for the top 1%. And for the bottom 10%, we learned in the last 24 hours, they won't even get a little bit of a tax cut. In fact, when all of the components of this bill are factored in, they will be 4% worse off than they were before. And oh, by the way, for the side that always talks about deficit and debt, boy, they really care about the national debt when there's a Democrat in the White House. But then when there's a Republican in the White House, they go about adding more to it. Don't take my word for it. The nonpartisan CBO shows, the bipartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget shows, the right of center Cato Institute shows, left of center group shows. They've actually united the right, the center, and the left, all in agreement that this bill adds trillions more to our national debt. We can do better. As I said at the very beginning, this is one of the most important votes we will ever cast in this chamber. I am proud to stand here on behalf of this side of the aisle and say hell no to this bill. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, the nonpartisan CBO was off by $1 trillion in projecting the annual deficit back in 2022. They were off by $1 trillion in projecting what the revenue would be. It was record revenue after we passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So I just thought I'd say that for the record. Not the remainder of my time, I want to say thank you to my ranking member. He is a great guy, and he is a good friend and an excellent partner in this endeavor. I know he loves the country. We disagree today. We've disagreed along the way, but we've also worked together to have record bipartisan legislation for the Budget Committee, and I'm just grateful for you. So I want to thank the ranking member, and I now urge the adoption of the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time, which I don't think I have any, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. All time for debate by the Budget Committee has expired. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Smith, and the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Neal, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, we embark on a golden age for working families and small businesses with the one big, beautiful bill. We make permanent the 2017 Trump tax cuts. We add a $1,300 tax cut for families compared to what they are paying this year and halt a $1,700 tax increase. Working families, farmers, and small businesses win with this bill. We expand and make permanent the small business deduction and increase the child tax credit, the standard deduction, and the death tax exemption. President Trump promised no tax on tips, overtime pay, and car loan interest. Hard-working Americans working overtime get up to $1,750 more in their pocket under this bill. Those working for tips get $1,700 more, and families buying U.S.-made cars can deduct their auto loan interest. President Trump promised no taxes on Social Security, and in this bill, we deliver low and middle income seniors on Social Security will now have their tax liability erased with an increase in their standard deduction. Under this bill, if you build businesses here in America, you win. Not only do we renew incentives for domestic research and development, we do 100% immediate expensing and the deduction for interest expense. But we also deliver on President Trump's promise to revitalize American manufacturing with 100% expensing for new factories and improvements of existing facilities. Small and medium-sized manufacturers also win with greater tax benefits. We replace bad tax policy with good tax policy, ending Biden-era tax breaks and special interest giveaways to the wealthy and well-connected and China. We hold accountable woke elite universities and tax-exempt organizations that abuse their generous tax benefits. President Trump stopped the flow of illegal immigrants over our borders. This bill will stop the flow of taxpayer benefits to their pockets. After the October 7th attacks on Israel, rampant anti-Semitism stormed college campuses. The Ways and Means Committee investigated. Given the school's massive tax benefits, Jewish students testified about living in fear as administrators failed to condemn the behavior. No longer. Some of the worst offenders colleges with endowments reaching into the tens of billions will now face the same taxation rate as corporations. The One Big Beautiful Bill gives America a big, beautiful raise, with the average American household seeing real take-home pay go up by as much as $13,300. We will save or create 7.4 million jobs and 1 million new small business jobs annually, and unlock $1.5 trillion in additional small business economic growth, including $284 billion in growth just from manufacturing alone. We can boost short-run real GDP by as much as 5.2% and long-run real GDP by over 3%. Renewing the successful Opportunity Zones program will help distressed communities, especially rural ones, by spurring over $100 billion in new investment. Parents win with expanded education savings accounts to choose the education that best fits their kids' needs. Americans, they get greater control over their health care with expanded health savings accounts. Working families, they get better access to child care and a permanent paid leave tax credit. Supporting the working class is deeply personal for me. I was raised in a single-wide trailer in a town of less than 5,000 people. My grandparents didn't ever have running water. The average income in my hometown of Salem, Missouri is just over $24,000. My priority is the working class because the working class raised me. I urge my colleagues, support the One Big Beautiful Bill. Make American families and workers thrive again. Make rural America and Main Street grow again, and help America win again. I reserve the balance of my time.
Time is reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I might consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Well, this big, beautiful bill must be so beautiful that we're debating it at 4:15 in the morning to avoid the scrutiny of the public for a piece of legislation that was altered just hours ago. I would challenge some members on the other side to take an exam on what was added to this legislation before we have a chance to vet it. And my friend, the chairman, he said that his modest youth, how challenging it was. I share a similar story. So you know what? We can both thank Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal for those opportunities. And when he was talking about growth rates, I thought he was going to say, bring back Bill Clinton, because that's where those growth rates came from. So the cat's out of the bag. $2.3 trillion was borrowed in 2017 to pay for a tax cut that overwhelmingly went to people at the very top. So what are we about to do this evening, or this morning, or last night? We are going to borrow $4 trillion, and with interest payments over the next 10 years, $5 trillion to justify a tax cut for the billionaire class. That's what this is about. Or as the gentleman from Kentucky said, and no raving liberal, you're talking about adding $30 trillion to the debt over the next few years. 14 million people are going to lose their health insurance to pay for this tax cut for wealthy people. We got Medicaid, we got food assistance, child care, health care, and you know what? Everybody in this chamber, every member of this House, you should call your local hospitals and ask them to lay out the formula for how their pay works in terms of reimbursements. Overwhelmingly, it's almost 2/3 from Medicare and Medicaid, and this is going to lead, particularly in red states, to closure. So let me give you some numbers I think that are really intriguing, despite that argument that we heard from the other side about how all this money is going to go to people at the lower end. Their slogan ought to be, we're rich and we're not going to take it anymore. That's where this argument is headed. So let me give you some numbers. If you made $1 million last year, you're going to get $81,000 of tax relief. If you made less than $50,000, guess what? Not quite so lucky. But you know what? $1 a day goes a long way, because that's where the numbers land. When they talk about broken promises, I listened to a Republican tonight on TV, a younger guy. He said, well, we reject what CBO has had to say. In the Ways and Means Committee in the tax world, this is scripture. That's how important it is. We might not like the answers we get from time to time. We might be upset about it, but we know that the people who have delivered that are not Democrats, they're not Republicans, they're economists, tax attorneys, and CPAs. So let me just remind everybody on the Republican side about a couple of other things that I think are really important. Most of them supported postal reform. That cost money. Republicans voted for the CHIPS Act. That cost money. They voted for the infrastructure bill. That cost money. 30 of them voted for the Butch-Lewis Act. That cost money. How about the PAC Act for our veterans? That costs money. The Inflation Reduction Act, despite their efforts to deride it, their members are going to groundbreakings and taking advantage of it right now. One piece of testimony the other night in the committee said that there's one congressional district that is receiving $6 billion of investment. Boy, I'd hate to explain that to my constituents, that I was sending $6 billion back to Washington. I call attention to this because they supported these issues along the way, and now they want an excuse to cut taxes for people at the very top. And that's where these tax cuts are going, to people at the very top. That is not to be denied. I hope as we listen in the next few minutes to the contrast that we would offer if we were in the majority, where we could agree tonight on the very basic fact that I'm going to offer. We could agree with 98% of the tax legislation if they kept the number at $400,000 and fewer. So people under $400,000 would keep their tax cuts, and people at the top would go to 39.6. Those are Clinton-Obama rates, and they work fine for the country. We all have some degree of honor to keep here. How about those soldiers from Afghanistan and Iraq? They deserve our care. Closing veterans service offices? I just did a town hall with veterans. They're astounded by what's happening already. I'm looking forward to the next 25 minutes of debate on this side and the next 25 minutes of debate on the other side, because I'm telling you, they're trying to sell you at 4:22 in the morning a bad piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Smith.
Gentleman from Nebraska is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of this package, which fulfills commitments to secure our border, rein in waste, and strengthen the economy for American families. In the Ways and Means Committee portion of this bill, we build on the success, huge success, of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act by further increasing the standard deduction, increasing the child tax credit, and further reducing taxes on income earned by family-owned farms, ranches, and small businesses. We also make a landmark investment in educating kids with the inclusion of my bill, the Educational Choice for Children Act, which creates a tax credit for scholarships to meet the needs of K-12 students and puts more parents back in control of their child's education, regardless of zip code. In addition, we are bringing an end to the unauthorized, wasteful, and redundant IRS direct file program, which directly contradicts taxpayers' best interest. This moment is years in the making, and we now have the opportunity to deliver on the job Americans elected us to do in a fiscally responsible way. I strongly urge my colleagues to support this bill. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, a recipient of the Purple Heart who knows something about veterans issues, Mr. Thompson.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to this big, terrible bill. This bill takes health care away from 14 million people. 9 million people lose food assistance with this bill. And it adds $4.3 trillion to the debt. And that's before the interest on that. This bill also advances China in the race for renewable energy superiority at a time when energy demand is soaring off the top of the charts. All of this to give a tax cut to the Musk billionaire-type donors. Mr. Neal talked about the distribution charts. The distribution charts are the coin of the realm. That's what we go by. And you look at those distribution charts, they tell the truth. If you make under $50,000 a year, you get a tax cut of about $260. If you make $1 million a year, you get a tax cut of about $81,500. All of this to give a big tax cut to the richest people in the country. Our constituents lose, our hospitals and our clinics close, our veterans community lose. This is a bad bill. I urge a no vote.
Gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remind the gentleman from California that a family of four making $96,334, the median income in California's fourth, would see a $2,167 tax increase if the Trump tax cuts expire. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Estes.
Gentleman from Kansas, recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to urge my colleagues to support our one big, beautiful bill. First, let me outline what this bill doesn't do. It doesn't take away Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security from Americans who need it. And it doesn't give lavish tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires. Here's what it does do. It ends benefits for illegal immigrants. Instead of giving Medicaid to able-bodied adults, it prioritizes the benefit for children, seniors, and low-income Americans. It provides a tax credit for seniors, exceeding President Trump's plan to end taxes on Social Security. It provides funding for more border security to keep our country safe. And perhaps more importantly, it extends the pro-family, pro-growth policies from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that even the New York Times and Washington Post admitted giving tax cuts to middle-class Americans. And how do we know this will work? Because we saw TCJA boost wages, job growth, and tax revenue, despite the CBO's biased and inaccurate scoring in 2017. Mr. Speaker, I urge our colleagues to vote in favor of one big, beautiful bill. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone.
Gentleman from New Jersey is
Ranking member of
recognized
Energy
for 2
and
minutes.
Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For months, President Trump and congressional Republicans have been promising that they would not cut Medicaid or Medicare. The reality is that Republicans are cutting both Medicaid and Medicare in this bill. They're essentially repealing parts of the Affordable Care Act, and this bill will destroy the health care system in this country, and it keeps getting worse with each GOP amendment. The GOP tax scam takes health care away from at least 13.7 million Americans so they can give giant tax breaks to billionaires and big corporate interests. It's a shameful reverse Robin Hood scheme. They're stealing from you to give to the rich. And Republicans are stripping health care away from people by putting all sorts of burdensome and time-consuming roadblocks in the way of people just trying to get by. The vast majority of people on Medicaid are already working. This is not about work. It's about burying people in so much paperwork that they fall behind and lose their health coverage. And if someone loses their health coverage through Medicaid, this GOP tax scam also bans them from getting coverage through the ACA marketplace. It's just one of the cruel ways that this bill basically repeals the ACA and makes it more difficult for people to get affordable health insurance. Now, I just want to say the Republican bill also makes it more difficult for states to finance their share of Medicaid costs by preventing them from implementing new provider taxes. This will be catastrophic for states as their health care needs change over time and will force them to either increase taxes on their residents or cut healthcare services. And for those of you who say it doesn't impact Medicare, the GOP tax scam will also cut Medicare. I repeat, Medicare. And it basically a $500 billion cut to Medicare because of the sequestration under the pay-go. and the Medicare cuts will lead to reduced access to care for seniors, longer wait times for appointments, and increased costs. Mr. Speaker, the GOP tax scam destroys the healthcare system by cutting over $1 trillion, and this bill should be defeated. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Missouri.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. LaHood.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the One Big Beautiful Bill. For the past year, Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee have worked to craft tax policy legislation that delivers on our promises to the American people and will provide rocket fuel to our economy. By making President Trump's historic tax cuts permanent, expanding the child tax credit, expanding tax on tips and overtime pay, delivering tax relief for seniors, permanently expanding the small business deduction, and putting in place the research and development tax credit, and much more. The bottom line is H.R. 1 will give a vital boost for our families, workers, farmers, and businesses nationwide. I am proud to say that this package also includes language from my bipartisan legislation, the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. I've heard from constituents and local leaders across Illinois' 16th congressional district that have expressed that a lack of available affordable housing is one of the most significant barriers to economic success in their communities and across the country. By expanding and improving the low-income housing tax credit, H.R. 1 will jumpstart the development and construction of affordable housing nationwide and support the needs of our growing workforce. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I want to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois whose work in the adoption space is a model for America, Mr. Davis.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I behold no beauty in cutting and seeing cut the heart out of health care in America. I see no beauty in children not being able to take care of themselves because their parents don't have the resources. I see no beauty in a bill that promotes wealth for the wealthy, decreases services and resources for those at the bottom. It's a bad bill. It's not good for America. I yield back.
Gentleman from Missouri.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Feenstra.
Gentleman from Iowa is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Smith. President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill delivers on the promises that we made to Iowa workers, manufacturers, farmers, and small businesses, and our families. The bill increases the small business deduction, helping Iowa small business invest in their workers and grow their operations. It also doubles 179 small business expensing, which means better paying jobs for every Iowa worker. President Trump promised a manufacturing revival in our country, and Iowa will be the first to deliver it. We restored R&D expensing and 100% bonus depreciation to rebuild domestic manufacturing, creating new jobs and bringing investment back to our country and back to our state. President Trump promised a strong economy, manufacturing dominance, and our big, beautiful bill delivers this for our country and for Iowans. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. President. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from California, Congresswoman Sanchez.
The gentlelady from California is recognized for 1 minute.
The bill that we are debating this morning is an insult to every American who works for a living. American families are struggling. Under President Trump and Republican leadership, they've seen nothing but chaos. Prices for everyday necessities like food, clothing, diapers, and formula keep rising because of Trump's tariffs. Premiums for health insurance, car insurance, and housing are going up, making it harder to make ends meet. Americans are worried about their future. People are afraid about losing their jobs, their health care, student aid, and food assistance. And this bill brings that pain. Almost 14 million people will lose their health care coverage under this Republican bill. And for what? So billionaires can get even richer while the rest of us drown in debt. This is outrageous. Republicans are doling out tax cuts for the wealthiest while destroying the means of survival for hardworking families. This bill assaults those seeking the American dream by stealing tax benefits and services from working people who are paying taxes. It would deny the child credit to 2 million children who live in the United States. Here's an idea. How about you start working for the people that you represent, not your wealthy donors?
Time has expired. Gentleman
But I
from
guess that's
from
asking
Missouri.
too much from people who have lost their moral compass.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Trump tax cuts expire, in the Congresswoman's district, 95,070 of California 38 families would see their household child tax credit slash in half. That is helping your constituents. I'd love to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Hearn.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of this one big, beautiful bill. The American people have heard a lot of lies about this bill. The left and their friends in the media have settled for demagoguing and fear-mongering to try to stop President Trump from delivering on his promises to the American people. Fortunately for all of us, the bill that they conjured up just simply doesn't exist. What does exist is a bill that champions working-class families. It strengthens the middle class and provides much-needed support to small businesses. It's thanks to President Trump's leadership on this big, beautiful bill that we have something we can all be proud of. I'd like to thank all of the committees and the chairs who worked on this legislation, but in particular, our chairman of the Ways and Means, Jason Smith, who knew 2 years ago that this might happen, this might occur. And we'd be exactly in this position, and he spent those years ensuring our committee was prepared, educated, and empowered to be ambassadors for the president's tax policies. I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I yield back.
Before I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, let me remind both sides. Direct your comments to the chair as we continue through debate. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I always do, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I want to yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Alabama, whose hospitals I have visited, Congresswoman Sewell.
Gentlelady from Alabama is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to the one big billionaire boondoggle bill. We are here because, according to President Trump, Elon Musk, and Republicans in Congress, billionaires and giant corporations don't have enough money. We could be working to help Americans deal with the high cost of living. We could be working to make sure that health care is affordable for all. But what are we doing? At 4:35 a.m. in the morning, we're preparing to vote on a bill that will provide a $4 trillion tax giveaway to the wealthy, well-connected, and well-off. And how will we pay for it? We'll pay for it by kicking 13.7 million Americans off of Medicaid and cutting $300 billion in SNAP benefits from hungry families. The people that I represent in Alabama's 7th Congressional District are good and honest Americans. They work hard every day. They make enormous sacrifices to support themselves and their families. But they are hurting. They are hurting and being crushed by high costs of living, and they live paycheck to paycheck. Meanwhile, my Republican colleagues are hell-bent on providing and making life much harder for them. It's outrageous. It's simply unacceptable. This is a sad day in Congress. I strongly oppose this bill, and I give this warning. Hands off Medicaid and hands off SNAP.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from Missouri.
I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from West Virginia, Ms. Miller.
Gentlelady from West Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in strong support of one big, beautiful bill. Ways and Means Republicans have worked tirelessly for 2 years, traveling across America and hearing from real people about the impact of the 2017 Trump tax cuts had on them. Working families got more money back in their paychecks from a simplified tax code. Main Street America was able to utilize the small business deduction to weather the storm of high inflation during the Biden years, and larger businesses were able to invest more of their money domestically because of a globally competitive corporate rate. This one big, beautiful bill builds on all of that successful tax policy and then some. This bill gives the average working family a $1,300 tax cut. It delivers on President Trump's promises of no tax on tips and no tax on overtime pay. It makes permanent the 199A small business deduction to keep our economy humming. It provides relief to gig workers by ending the Democrats' ridiculous $600 1099K reporting threshold and reverting back to the time-tested standard of 20,200 transactions. This legislation will undoubtedly make the life of the average American better. And thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I want to yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Washington, Congresswoman Del Bene, who really knows something about the child credit.
Gentlelady from Washington is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. President Trump and Republicans love calling this one big, beautiful bill, but it's really one big, broken promise. Republicans swore they would lower costs on day one. Instead, families are paying more for groceries, energy, and health care bills. Republicans have spent months fighting over how many Americans they're going to kick off of Medicaid and how fast. This is literally a matter of life and death. And for what? Another massive round of tax breaks to pad the wallets of the ultra-wealthy and big corporations. A mom from Kirkland told me recently that she was horrified to see what Republicans are doing to these programs. She raised 2 kids with the support of Medicaid, SNAP, and the child tax credit. She said the supports Republicans are cutting help real people live real, productive lives. I urge you to listen to your constituents and vote no on this big, broken promise. I yield back.
Gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, this is what the one big, beautiful bill is all about. This is what 77 million Americans voted for. Make the 2017 Trump tax cuts permanent. No tax on tips. No tax on overtime. No tax on car loan interest. And tax relief for seniors. The one big, beautiful bill puts money back in the pockets of the people who make this country run. President Trump promised a new golden age, and House Republicans are delivering on that promise. The American people, they're counting on Congress to get the job done. Let's pass this bill, and let's deliver for American workers, farmers, families, and small businesses. I yield 1 minute and 15 seconds to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Malliotakis.
Gentlelady from New York is recognized for 1 minute and 15 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In this bill, we are providing real tax relief for hardworking Americans, for middle-class families, for us senior citizens, not the billionaires like the Democrats claim. We increase the state and local tax deduction, the standard deduction, the child tax credit. The last 2 would be cut in half if we take no action today. We provide tax relief by including my legislation to provide a bonus deduction to reduce the taxes that our seniors pay on their Social Security income. We fulfill President Trump's commitment to eliminate taxes on tips and overtime, and we stop the return of the alternative minimum tax that crushed middle-class families. We allow Americans to fully deduct auto loan interest on their American-made vehicles, and we help young graduates with student loan debt get reimbursed by their employers tax-free. All of that is for working class, middle class, not billionaires. We also make sure that this bill keeps our borders secure and funds the deportation of criminal illegal immigrants, and we increase and strengthen domestic energy production and security, and we safeguard Medicaid for our seniors, for our disabled, for our children with disabilities, and we crack down on the fraudsters by targeting waste, fraud, and abuse. The Democrats can continue to fight for the fraudsters. They continue to fight for the illegal immigrants, but we're going to deliver for the working families, middle class, and senior citizens. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I remind the gentlelady that the SALT deduction that we offered in our tax bill on a secret ballot would have gotten all the Republicans from New York and New Jersey and California. With that, I want to yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Wisconsin, Congresswoman Moore, who nobody has ever walked away from saying, I think she's undecided.
Gentlelady from Wisconsin is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'll just say this, that the greatest trick that the devil plays is to convince you that it won't be you who he devours. It will be those others, those so-called illegals, those trans people, the welfare queens, and the boy in the basement who won't work. So you justify slashing hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid, undermining the ACA, cutting $500 billion in Medicare, adding trillions of dollars to the debt, facilitating the dismantling of care from hospitals, community health centers, nursing homes to finance billionaire tax cuts. And then the bell sounds and you screech, for whom does the bell toll? It tolls for thee. And Mr. Speaker, I will yield back, but I will not yield my soul. Do not vote for this bill.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Kustoff.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise today to speak in favor of the One Big Beautiful Bill. My colleagues and I on the House Ways and Means Committee on the Republican side have been preparing for this moment for 2 years. Mr. Speaker, we have traveled across the country and conducted field hearings, meeting and hearing from individuals, from manufacturers, from farmers, and from small business owners. And the message that we got from them was clear. Make permanent all those successful provisions from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. There is no doubt that when we passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017, we ushered in a red-hot economy that created jobs and opportunities for all Americans. It's essential that the House of Representatives pass this bill today to cement a pro-growth tax code and usher our nation into a new era of prosperity for all. The American people in November voted overwhelmingly for this, and now it's our time to deliver. And thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts, the ranking member of the Oversight Committee, my friend, Congressman Lynch.
Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Springfield for yielding. I rise this morning on behalf of our friend and colleague, General Jerry Conley, the gentleman from Virginia, with the hope of infusing this debate with his passion and his wisdom on behalf of the federal workers for whom there was no greater champion. Jerry was especially grateful for the federal workers at the VA and the Walter Reed Medical Center, especially the nurses and therapists and physicians and support staff that cared for our veterans and active military. In all honesty, Jerry was furious at the way the federal workers and veterans are being treated under this bill. He was angry that Donald Trump purged 325,000 federal workers, including at least 3,000 workers at the VA, and that the cuts in this reconciliation bill will require the firing of 80,000 more workers at the VA, at least 27,000 of those workers veterans themselves. While the termination of these workers at the VA is outrageous and disrespectful, it's only half the story, because it is the mission of those workers at the VA to care for our veterans that will be ended as well. We should each of us remember that veterans' benefits are different. They are special obligations taken on by our country, our society, and our Congress. Veterans' benefits are obligations owed to our veterans for courageous service previously rendered. And the promise to every son and daughter who puts on that uniform is that if you come home from service with the scars of war, visible or invisible, we will take care of you and your family. That promise has been maintained throughout this nation's history by Democrat and Republican administration without pause. Until now, until tonight, until Donald Trump signs this bill. Mr. Speaker, this is a disgraceful way to treat both workers at the VA and the veterans they serve. I urge my colleagues to vote against this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Missouri.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman, the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee.
Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, for yielding, and also thank you for your leadership, your patience, and your unwavering dedication to put this tax policy and this budget reconciliation bill before us. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the opportunity we have to not only provide historic tax relief for hardworking Americans, but also to spur investments in our economy by developing the resources of our land. This is our unique opportunity to do something truly worthy to be remembered in our day and in our generation. The Natural Resources Committee is proud to have played a key part in this legislation. Our title far exceeds our $1 billion instruction. The Congressional Budget Office estimates it will generate over $20 billion in savings and new revenue for the federal government, primarily by direct royalty and lease fees from the sale of oil, gas, timber, and mined resources, while curbing wasteful spending. But CBO's direct revenue evaluation is only a paragraph in a much larger story. Mr. Speaker, it is impossible to utilize billions of dollars of resources without massive investments in oil rigs, pipelines, LNG facilities, mines, refineries, sawmills, mobile equipment, machinery, workforce development, and the list goes on with the upstream and downstream economic benefits of resource development. Our title reinstates onshore and offshore oil and gas lease sales, holds annual geothermal lease sales, and ensures a fair process for critical mineral development nationwide. We've also directed the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management to utilize long-term timber sale contracts. We're putting our fiscal foot forward by using America's resources to generate wealth for America, while restoring American energy dominance and giving Americans the opportunity to make products from America, in America, for America, and the world. I urge my colleagues to join me in kickstarting this new golden age of America by voting yes, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Virginia, Congressman Beyer, who really knows something about the bond market.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our dearly departed friend and colleague, Jerry Conley, used to say our job was to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. This bill does the opposite. My Republican friends say this act is about helping the working families of America, but nothing could be further from the truth. This monstrous bill strips health care from 14 million Americans. It cuts $300 billion in food and nutrition from working Americans, while giving a temporary head fake to those working on overtime and those working for tips. It actually raises taxes on the poorest 20% of Americans, exactly the folks my Republican friends pretend it helps. The overwhelming benefits of H.R. 1 flow to the wealthiest Americans, the largest transfer of wealth from working Americans to rich in the history of our country. Mr. Speaker, Jerry Conley was a devout Catholic who studied to be a priest, and he and I agreed that the essence of this bill sends the opposite of the message of the New Testament, which is to give our lives to help the poor. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Missouri.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Moran.
Gentleman from Texas, recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise in strong support of the One Big Beautiful Bill. This bill is our opportunity to deliver on the promises we made to the American people. It's our chance to put working families, small businesses, and communities back at the center of our economic future. In the 1st District of Texas, the median income is just $62,000. And if we fail to pass this bill, a family of 4 at that income level will see their taxes go up by over $1,100, a staggering 22% increase. That's not just a number, that's 6 weeks' worth of groceries. That's money that can be used to fix a truck, invest in a small business, or save for a child's future. But if we do pass this bill, we protect that $1,100 of hard-earned income. In fact, we protect every American's money. At its core, the One Big Beautiful Bill is about more than dollars and cents. It's about liberty and empowering the American people. It's about giving families, workers, and small businesses the freedom to thrive without government taking more of their money. We have the chance in this moment to expand opportunity, restore dignity in work, and strengthen the American dream. That's worth fighting for. Let us not fail in this task. Let us pass the One Big Beautiful Bill. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts with 13 3/4 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the very thoughtful gentleman from Illinois and a member of the Ways and Means Committee,
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill and in support of America's working families, families who are trying to provide health care to feed their children, to secure their future. My Republican colleagues continue hiding under the cover of darkness as we sit here at almost 5 a.m. in the morning wrapping up. What are you trying to hide, I ask them. The largest cut ever to Medicaid, 14 million losing health care. The largest cut ever to fighting child hunger. Adding $5 trillion to the nation's debt, all to line the pockets of Trump's super-rich family and friends. Just yesterday, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office assessed that the bottom 10% of taxpayers will be poorer because of this bill, while the top 10% will get richer. Not only that, the CBO determined that the Republican plan to explode the deficit will trigger mandatory cuts to Medicare totaling $500 billion. My Republican colleagues are attempting to hide the truth of this bill because they know the pain it will inflict on American families. This is not one beautiful bill. It's one awful deal for the country. I urge my colleagues to oppose the bill. Stand up for your constituents who will be worse off if this bill passes. I yield back.
Gentleman from Missouri with 11 3/4 minutes remaining.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Yocum.
Gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the chairman. Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of the one big, beautiful bill. The pro-family, pro-worker, pro-growth bill before us. We keep hearing the same tired claims from my friends on the other side of the aisle about giveaways to the rich. They said the same things about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. But you know what? It wasn't true. Even the New York Times admitted that most payers got a tax cut, but many didn't believe it. Why? Quote, to a large degree, the gap between perception and reality on the tax cuts appears to flow from a sustained and misleading effort by liberal opponents. So I ask the American people, are you going to believe your bank accounts, or will you believe the same people who told you it was a racist conspiracy theory that COVID originated in a Wuhan lab, who censored Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation, who insisted that the former president was doing cartwheels in the Oval Office? Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you. I might say that the former president was writing historic legislation in the Oval Office and at least signing the products that came from these committees. With that, let me yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, a very important member of the Committee on Ways and Means, Congressman Panetta.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
This Republican partisan tax bill will be the largest self-inflicted wound on America's working families in our nation's history, with the largest cut in health care and food assistance to pay for the largest tax cuts for billionaires. Now, I get that this bill is about fulfilling the president's promises, but like the president, you can't rely on it for working families, as the bottom 10% would lose basic services so that the top 10% can increase their wealth. What's worse is that in order to pay for this bill, you're relying on not just the cuts, but fabricated economic growth numbers, ignoring costs of the TCJA, and hoping that there's revenues from tariffs. Yet even with all of that, you stick it to our children by adding trillions to our federal debt. Look, not only are our creditors and our allies losing faith in our nation, but Americans watching this tonight are losing faith in Congress. If we worked together, we could have helped working families bring down prices and bring down our national debt. Ultimately, we could have restored faith in this institution. Instead, I'm voting no on this partisan bill because it gives into the president's politics, it breaks your promise to working families, and it gives up on our promise to the future of our children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Missouri.
I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Van Dyne.
Gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Over the past 2 years, my colleagues and I on Ways and Means have traveled around the country listening to working families, to small business owners and job creators. North Texans have been very clear. They want relief, certainty, and a tax code that works for them, not against them. Last week, we delivered. The bill that we passed out of committee reflects the needs, the real needs of our communities, and the promises that we made to the American people. It is a strong, common-sense compromise that builds on the success of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. This bill expands the child tax credit, makes the small business deduction permanent, and boosts the standard deduction with a new enhancement for seniors. It restores immediate expensing for R&D and increases access to tax-free health savings accounts. In short, this one beautiful big bill stops the largest tax increase in American history and delivers historic tax relief instead. I look forward to its swift passage and to President Trump signing it into law.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from California, a valuable member of the Ways and Means Committee, Congressman Gomez.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Richie. So let's get straight. This is one big bill, but it's a bill that steals Medicaid, it steals SNAP, it steals all the assistance from working people in order to give tax breaks to the billionaires in this country. If you're making less than $30,000 a year, you're you will pay $20 billion more in taxes over the 10-year period. If you make $50,000 a year, you have a 50-50 chance of seeing any kind of change in your taxes, while the billionaire establishment gets a cut of $270,000. This is the biggest transfer of wealth in our nation's history. It is literally stealing from the poor to give to the rich. And they want to talk about how they went around the country to listen. Well, they didn't listen very hard, because what they are doing, the Republicans, are hurting average working people. They are not helping when it comes to housing. They're not helping when it comes to childcare. They're not helping. And when they do talk about housing, it's 20,000 units a year for 10 years. That's a drop in the bucket. So we need our Republican colleagues to actually do something besides the cheap talk and the theatrics of going around the town, but only listening to the billionaires in the end of the day. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, if the Trump tax cuts were to expire in Mr. Gomez's district, a family of four making $62,008, the median income in California's 34th district, would see a $1,139 tax increase if the Trump tax cuts expire. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bean.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it's a scary time to be a taxpayer in the United States or those that own a small business. Both are facing a tsunami of tax increases, the largest in U.S. history. But, Mr. Speaker, I've got good news. Help is on the way. The one big, beautiful bill is real tax relief for real Americans. It's for those that are paid in tips, hourly workers that are working overtime, for families and seniors who've been struggling under the weight of inflation, and it's for the 91% of Americans who use the standard deduction. The bill expands the child tax credit. It secures our border, enhances education and health savings options. It unleashes American energy. It will encourage production on U.S. soil. Made in America will mean something once more. So buckle up, America, and put your seat in the upright position, because with the passage of this bill, the golden age of America is ready for takeoff. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, might I inquire as to the time remaining on both sides?
Gentleman from Massachusetts has 10.5 minutes remaining. Gentleman from Missouri has 8.5 minutes remaining.
With that, let me yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Nevada, who is a terrific advocate for the people of his constituency, Congressman
Gentleman from
Bushford.
Nevada is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the chairman. This is no way to govern. In the dead of the night, congressional Republicans are passing this partisan, big, ugly bill for billionaires. Who are you here to serve? Billionaires or the constituents that elected you to bring down costs and to make life more affordable? Your constituents, like mine, rely on Medicaid and public education, veteran programs, SNAP, child care, Head Start, Medicare. But yet Republicans claim to be for working people, and yet the meager tax relief that middle-class workers and families receive under your plan, about $1 a day, are temporary. But the tax cuts for billionaires and big corporations are permanent. That is a choice. I'm for permanent tax cuts for moms and dads, for small business owners. Who are you here to serve? The GOP budget cuts from the masses to give to the few, to billionaires who barely pay taxes to begin with. I know who I'm here to serve, the 750,000 people who elected me from Nevada, and I'll continue to fight for them to make their lives better, not worse. I urge my colleagues to stand with your constituents and against the billionaires.
From Missouri.
Speaker, let's talk about who benefits from this bill. A single mom, a waitress in Nevada, working long hours. She's raising one child. She's living paycheck to paycheck. She gets a bigger standard deduction underneath our legislation. She won't pay tax on tips on our legislation, and she gets a boosted child tax credit. That's a $4,891 tax cut. not pennies. That's real money for working Americans. This is what it means to stand with the working class and millions of tipped workers. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Ohio.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Chairman Smith and the Ways and Means Committee for all the hard work that we put into this legislation. Mr. Speaker, strengthening our economy starts at home, and I'm proud to rise in support of the One Big Beautiful Bill, which delivers much-needed tax relief to the American workers, farmers, and families. This legislation builds on the foundation laid by the 2017 tax reforms, allowing families to keep more of their hard-earned money, empowering them to invest in their futures, support their children, and build brighter lives. I'm especially pleased that this bill includes making the increased standard deduction levels from 2017 permanent. Simplifying the tax code has been transformative, especially for working-class communities where most taxpayers claim the standard deduction. The guaranteed standard deduction has made tax season faster, easier, and far less stressful for millions of Americans. Mr. Speaker, the facts are clear. Over 93% of my constituents claim the standard deduction. If we fail to act, millions of Americans will see a tax hike of nearly $2,000 per household. Permanency gives working families the certainty they need to plan ahead, whether it's saving for college, investing at home, or simply trying to make ends meet with confidence and greater financial security. I urge my colleagues to vote yes. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, let me yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlelady from Massachusetts, Ms. Presley.
Massachusetts is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in vigorous opposition to this bill that is callous and cruel and clueless about what the American people are dealing with. This bill, if passed, we're talking about generations of harm, lives lost because of defunded cancer research, pregnant mothers denied essential health care, school lunch programs gutted, our babies hungry, and for what? To line the pockets and stroke the egos of a few petty billionaires? I believe in the promise of this nation. I believe in the possibility that government can do right by people and help us through our most vulnerable moments. This bill is the antithesis of that. This bill is a threat to the lives and livelihoods of so many people. The mood up here is somber. Y'all are gleeful. It's somber because this is shameful. Republicans, we just need 4 of you to be people of conscience to stand up against this, and in exchange, you can save lives. You can look your kids in the eye, and you can say that when everything was at stake, that you had clarity and you did the right thing. I'm not begging you for benevolence. I'm asking you for decency. Do right by the people that sent you here. I yield.
Gentleman from Missouri.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. McGuire.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding me the time. Mr. Speaker, President Trump and the Republican trifecta were elected this November to deliver results for the American people. This one big, beautiful bill we are considering tonight pinpoints waste, fraud, and abuse, secures our borders, and reignites economic growth. These are impactful tax cuts, reducing Social Security taxes, eliminating tax on tips, and eliminating tax on overtime will help the middle class American people. If the 2017 tax cuts are allowed to expire, 56,000 small businesses in my district alone would experience a 43.4% tax hike, and over 8,000 family-owned farms would have their death tax exemption slashed in half. I came to Congress to deliver real results, and that's what this bill does. In the defense portion of the bill, $34 billion is allocated for shipbuilding and the maritime industrial base in my district, Virginia, and the United States. This bill delivers on the America First promises President Trump and congressional Republicans made to the American people. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts, with 8½ minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So what I intend to do here is to close my time before I yield to the Democratic leader. And I want to talk a little bit about what I began with. First of all, let me just say as a courtesy and as a member of the Ways and Means Committee for 33 years, this debate should be taking place during the day. And I know the members on the other side feel the same way. There is no reason at 10 after 5 in the morning to be debating a bill of this consequence. It's as simple as that. These were legislative courtesies that we once extended to each other. And there is no reason for it to be playing out at a time when most Americans can't dial in to hear the debate. So there's no getting away from the fact that the Republican Party, the party of fiscal rectitude, the party that has lectured us for decades on spending patterns, who are about to borrow $4 trillion for a tax cut that is overwhelmingly going to go to people at the very top, including the billionaire class. What's troubling about it is that if you look back at these tax cuts, as I noted, $10 trillion of tax cuts since 2021. I'm sorry, since 2001 to the moment. In 2017, it's borrowed money, $2.3 trillion. This is $4 trillion, and when you get done paying the interest on it over the next 5 years, as the bond market reminded us again today, it's closer to $5 trillion. The party of fiscal rectitude. I call attention again to this because we would say that if you kept these tax cuts for people under $400,000 a year, you'd get a buy-in from us. We're okay with that. We object to the idea that people who are about to derive the biggest benefit don't need it. And you know what? In most instances, weren't asking for it as well. The theology that tax cuts pay for themselves is nonsense. We've heard that forever. But it is that continued effort that Republicans have to suggest that no matter what happens, a tax cut should be the most important consideration. 2 wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, and 2 tax cuts during those years? The collapse of Wall Street during those years of $2.3 trillion of tax cuts? Ronald Reagan had the good sense when he found out what the tax cuts meant against spending cuts, he reversed the position during that time. But the current Republican Party subscribes to this notion that you can be for infrastructure, you can take defense spending now that's headed over $1 trillion. You can vote for the infrastructure bill. You can vote for the CHIPS Act. You can vote for postal reform. And yes, 30 members voted on that side for the Butch-Lewis Act. You can do all of these things and simultaneously cut taxes. No, you can't. And we know that. We're in a position to argue, I think, with great force for the American people, because I know what happened. For all their talk about what happened in the tax cut of 2017, we easily won the House the next year. The American people don't buy this because they know where these tax cuts are going and intended to help people at the top when it is really the people at the bottom and then the middle who need help. So hospitals are going to close, children are going to go hungry, health care is going to be denied, but the billionaire class is going to pick up a considerable number of dollars. And again, the number that I cited earlier, if you make $1 million, you pick up $90,000 additional dollars. It's almost 10%. And if you make under $50,000, Mr. Speaker, you're getting $1 a day? That's what this tax package means? Defeat this bill, send it back to the Ways and Means Committee, compel the committee to negotiate, and we'd come up with a plan where the middle class would get the tax cuts, and then we would address subsequently the debt that is plaguing this nation. This legislation will take us to $40 trillion worth of debt. And they're going to lecture us on debt. It's the old story. On Monday, they blame us for debt, and on Tuesday, they add $4 trillion to it. So I'm going to reserve what I have left of time. I'm finished. But I will yield at the appropriate moment to the Democratic leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the fair manner in which you did this as well.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Missouri.
I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Lawler.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 30 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, when I ran for Congress, I said I would never support a tax bill that did not adequately lift the cap on salt. This bill does that. It increases the cap on salt by 300%. And I would remind my Democratic colleagues, when they had full control in Washington, they lifted the cap on salt by exactly $0. Zilch, zip, nada. Not $1 of increase in tax relief for hardworking New Yorkers. So to all my New York colleagues on the other side of the aisle, before you speak out and say that you don't support a 300% increase on the cap on salt, the fact is that this bill adequately addresses the cap on salt and provides tax relief to hardworking middle-class families.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I had not intended to rebut, Mr. Speaker. However, our tax bill had an $80,000 cap on salt, and it passed the House of Representatives.
Gentleman.
I reserve my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from Missouri.
Never became law.
Gentleman from Missouri.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins.
Stand by. House will be in order. How many minutes? For him. No. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, as a small businessman who started his business career under H.W. Bush and operated that business all the way through all the administrations up to and including the Biden administration, I can unequivocally say that the Trump tax policies and the Trump administration was the best for small business, period. That's why I joined the majority of the Americans across this country to vote to make those Trump policies permanent. You see, it doesn't matter. If you have 2 college degrees, no college degrees, brown, black, white, Trump's policies lifted all boats. That's why I encourage my colleagues to join me, pass this bill, and vote for Main Street. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I reserve, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman, time is reserved. Gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Louisiana, Leader Scalise.
Gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my friend from Missouri for his leadership in getting us to this point. So many other chairmen will talk about that too, but I want to rise in strong support, Mr. Speaker, of this one big, beautiful bill. This bill that's going to deliver on so many promises that the American people asked us to do for them. You know, we have elections in this country, and we had an election that had a lot of crystal clear messages sent in November. And we had a contrast, maybe one of the sharpest contrasts between 2 candidates for president. And if you read this bill, and maybe some of my friends on the other side haven't read it by some of the comments they've made, because you would think it's 2017 all over again when you listen to the things that they said, the same things they're saying tonight that they said in 2017, none of which turned out to be reality. And so they had an opportunity to make their case for raising taxes on the American people. In fact, their candidate for president was for a lot of the same things they're for tonight. Letting the Trump tax cuts expire, to punish those middle-class and low-income workers who benefited the most from those tax cuts, benefited tremendously. President Trump said that he was going to lock those tax rates in, not giving all these tax breaks you're talking about to millionaires and billionaires, but in fact to help the working families of this country who are struggling. They struggled after 4 years of the last administration. The weight of the failures of their policies that raised inflation, raised interest rates, made home ownership unachievable, made the ability to fill their own grocery carts unachievable. And President Trump said he would reverse it. How else did he say he was going to reverse it? President Trump said that we were going to produce more American energy. Now, the other side of the aisle has been very clear for years with an all-out assault on American energy. They've carried it out. They voted for it. They campaigned on it. And the voters rejected that false premise, that failed approach. Now, maybe they're upset that the voters said we want to produce more energy in America. But President Trump was crystal clear. You elect us, elect President Trump, elect a Republican House and Senate, and we will deliver for you. We will open up more American energy. From Anwar in Alaska to the Gulf of America. That's what he campaigned on, and maybe they're upset that he's actually delivering on those promises. And this bill delivers on those promises. A promise that will lower prices at the pump. When you go to the gas station, you'll be able to fill up your car. And so that's in this bill, but it also creates more jobs. Now, there are some people clearly who don't like that. Not just my friends on the other side of the aisle don't want to produce more American energy. You know who else doesn't want those provisions in this bill? Countries like Russia, countries like Iran, who have been making billions of dollars a month selling their energy on world markets because of the failed Biden policies. The policies that allowed them to enrich their countries and use that money for evil, to fund the war in Ukraine, to fund wars on terror around the world, terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, funded by the billions of dollars a month that those countries got from selling their oil on world markets because America was shut down. Well, America will be shut down no more when this one big beautiful bill is passed into law, because we will be able to produce our own energy here in America. You know, my friend Chairman Smith worked incredibly hard to make sure that this bill delivers for the whole country to get economic growth again. You will see an American renaissance, a golden age in this country that we haven't seen in generations. Why would people vote against that? Who knows? Who knows? I mean, the press talks about the other side being a party in disarray, and maybe you're seeing on display right now why, when they are vocally opposed to these kind of policies that'll get the country back on track. Why do they say tax cuts for the millionaires, and the billionaires, when they know it's not true? I'll tell you why, Mr. Speaker. Because not only do they know that's not the case, but they know who benefits the most from this bill. You know, one of the great new provisions of this bill that President Trump campaigned on, that Chairman Smith made sure to deliver on, was no tax on tips. Now, the last time I checked, Elon Musk does not get paid in tips. But you know who does? A lot of hardworking people across this country. Any restaurant you go to, talk to the waiters and waitresses. Ask them about their hopes and dreams. Ask them about their families. And what would they do with just a little bit more money in their paycheck? Do you know, Mr. Speaker, that big provision that every Democrat is going to vote against, the average tip worker makes $32,000 a year. And every Democrat will vote no on that benefit, while they hide behind the lie of the millionaires and the billionaires. Because they know that's not the case, but they also know if they're going to vote against every hardworking waiter and waitress who averages $32,000 a year, how do they get away with it? They've got to create some fake boogeyman that they can point to and say, gee whiz, look at the billionaire over there, as if class warfare, dividing Americans, is their way to try to get more power in Washington. How about we give people in America more power? Take it away from Washington. Empower the people in this country who have been struggling for too long. If you want to live the American dream, it can still exist. For a lot of people, they thought it was going away. President Trump ran and said, I will renew that promise. But it only happens if Congress delivers. Now, the other side will vote against it, every single one of them in lockstep. And they will root against the success of this bill. And then if it were to fail, they'd just go, look at that, the country's still in demise. Because they were against it every step of the way. We saw this play out, by the way, in the State of the Union just a few months ago, right here in this chamber. And America watched in shock. They want to see us come together. Can't we at least come together on things we agree on? And so there stood President Trump right at that podium, Mr. Speaker, And he talked about so many of the great things of this country, not partisan things, things that we used to all celebrate. Mr. Speaker, the President Trump, pointed over there to the balcony, where not only was the presidential family seated, but they also had some special guests. He pointed to a 13-year-old boy who had just beaten cancer. You want to talk about something that can unite the whole country, that can bring us all together. To say, yeah, you know, we might disagree on issues, big and small, and that happens. That's America. But we can all celebrate a 13-year-old boy who just beat cancer, Mr. Speaker. And what happened when he said that? We rose up and applauded, as we all should have. But what else happened? The other side sat there, sat down, grumpy, angry. I don't know why. I wouldn't even say, Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order, Mr. Speaker.
House will be in order.
Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't say it was because that he beat cancer, but it was just because President Trump happened to point out that he beat cancer. We should not root for or against a person like that based on what President Trump says he's for. Just because the talking points of the party went out and said, anything President Trump's for, be against. That's not a party platform. This country wants direction. President Trump ran on a direction, and their party did too. Wasn't like it wasn't laid out in the campaign. President Trump said he would secure America's border. That actually was the #1 issue. All across the country. I got to go around to a lot of parts of this country. You hear from a lot of different people. You see what their hopes and dreams are, but you'll also see from them, and they'll tell you, what they want to see us come together and address. And it didn't matter what part of the country you went to. They all said, for goodness sake, can we secure America's border? Millions of people coming in illegally. Many of them really bad people. Gang members, violent people that were harming Americans. We saw it over and over again. Laken Riley murdered. We finally brought, by the way, the first bill President Trump signed into law was the Laken Riley Act. To say if you come here and harm an American citizen, you're gone, you're deported. And this bill allows for the deportation of violent criminals that come here illegally and harm American citizens. We should all support that. The other side doesn't. They'll fly to Venezuela and El Salvador, Mr. President, to try to get out of prison a gang member who beats his wife. But in this bill, it allows President Trump to continue securing America's border. He's done phenomenal work on his own through executive action protecting America. But he needs money to build the wall. He needs money to let our Border Patrol agents have the ability to compete with the drug cartels of Mexico. It's embarrassing that today the drug cartels of Mexico, have better technology than America's Border Patrol agents. And we said, we're not going to allow that to happen again like the other side did. We're going to do something about it. We're going to give them those tools, night vision goggles, drones, other things, so that they can actually do the job that they came here to do. They put their lives on the line to keep us safe. The least we can do is allow them to have the ability to be safe themselves, to go home at night to their families while keeping our country safe. It's in this bill. We deliver on that promise, and so many others. We're making America competitive again in our military so that we can finally confront the threat that China poses militarily. We all talk about it. We all know what it means. But are we going to talk about it or do something about it? President Trump wants to do something about it. This Republican majority wants to do something about it. In this bill, we deliver on that promise. Everybody who votes no is saying no to that. Again, hide behind the millionaires and billionaires, but you're voting against strengthening America's military because that's in the bill. You're sure not talking about it on the other side, Mr. Speaker. We haven't heard them talking about it because they're about to vote against that. So let's be honest about it. But when you think about those benefits, you also got to recognize what a no vote means today. Because we've got two buttons. You press yes and you can press no. And if you vote no, you're voting against American energy. You're voting against securing America's border. You're voting against helping those middle-class families. You could run all the numbers. 22% tax increase on low and middle-income families. We're not talking about the millionaires and billionaires. We're talking about a family making $70,000 a year combined, who's struggling to get by, would like to make a little bit more investment maybe in their kids' education, might want to take a family vacation, and this bill gives them the opportunity to do it. And it also gives every small business in America the opportunity to make investment in America again. 199A provision that's locked in permanently so there's no uncertainty, so we can grow more jobs in America. That's a good thing. It's a good thing for a lot of us here. That's what a yes vote gets. A no vote tells every small business in America that they will be at a competitive disadvantage with the big corporations. So you hear them rallying, Mr. Speaker, against the fat cats and the big corporations, yet if they vote no, these are the facts, the big corporations, the global companies get a 21% rate, and your local small business would end up with a 43% rate. More than double. They would be non-competitive, your local small businesses, with the big corporations. We said that's not fair. We want to allow our small businesses to compete on a global stage with the big national corporations, and we do that in this bill. A no vote doesn't do that. And yes, we root out waste, fraud, and abuse, Mr. Speaker. Waste, fraud, and abuse so that vital programs in America actually work better for the people who deserve them. Why would somebody come up here and defend hundreds of billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse in Washington when hardworking families are barely struggling to get by and pay their taxes and are infuriated when they find out some of the waste that's going on up here and saying, when is somebody going to finally do something about the fraud so that I feel comfortable that if I'm funding my government, it's going to go to help the people who deserve it and not some 35-year-old kid who's fully able-bodied who's sitting in his mom's basement playing video games, getting over $40,000 in taxpayer-funded benefits while you're working two jobs, while the waiter or waitress averaging $32,000 a year is struggling to get by. We help them. That's who we're helping, those families who are struggling, and we will get this economy moving again. You can vote yes or you can vote no. I wish everybody would vote no. A yes vote gets America's economy moving again, allows President Trump to continue fighting for the hardworking families who elected him all across this country. Every swing state, majority of the American population want this kind of relief. So we're going to keep moving forward, Mr. Speaker. We're going to deliver for those families who deserve this help, who want to see America come back. And they know America can come back, but they know America's been held back for the last 4 years. The same people who have been telling you that President Biden's health was just fine are now telling you all these other things about millionaires and billionaires. We're going to get this right. This bill finally starts to right the ship of state. We all should come together and do that, Mr. Speaker. We've got so many great people who have worked so hard to get to this point, and we're still at the early stages. Let's send this bill over to the Senate, give them the opportunity to have their say as well. But ultimately, let's go deliver. Let's go deliver for that single mom who's working the night shift at a diner right now, who's going to have more money in her pocket because of this bill, who's maybe going to be able to send her kid to college because of this bill. We're going to deliver for those families. You could say yes or no. America's absolutely watching. America went to the polls in November and said we want and are calling on Congress to provide this relief. We ran and said, we'll do something about it and we'll fix it. And we're actually following through, Mr. Speaker, on that promise made to the American people. President Trump is leading the way. President Trump is going to turn this country around, and this bill gives him the tools to do just that. I urge everybody to vote yes. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me say to my friend, the majority leader, everybody on this side was cheering for the success of that young man defeating cancer. The way we're going to defeat cancer is not to cut NIH. Let me yield the remainder of our time to the very capable and distinguished minority leader, Mr. Jeffries, for 1 minute.
Gentleman from New York, the minority leader, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me also thank the distinguished gentleman from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts who's done a tremendous job leading the Ways and Means Committee on our side, Congressman Richie Neal. I also want to thank Ranking Member Brendan Boyle, Ranking Member Jim McGovern, all of the members of the Ways and Means Committee, the Budget Committee, the Rules Committee, every single member of the House Democratic Caucus who has stood on this floor, stood before the Rules Committee, participated in markups on behalf of the American people, in defense of the American people. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to this reckless, regressive, and reprehensible GOP tax scam. This is one big, ugly bill that House Republicans are trying to jam down the throats of the American people under the cover of darkness. This legislation will not make life better for the American people. The GOP tax scam represents an assault on the economy, an assault on health care, an assault on nutritional assistance, an assault on tax fairness, and an assault on fiscal responsibility. There are more than 100 other reasons to vote against this one big, ugly bill that can be found by reading this more than 1,000-page document. Those reasons are too numerous to mention, but this legislation also undermines reproductive freedom, undermines the progress that we have made in combating the climate crisis, undermines gun safety, undermines the rule of law and the independence of the federal judiciary. It even undermines the ability of hard-working and law-abiding immigrant families to provide remittances to their loved ones who may just happen to live abroad. There are more than 100 different reasons to vote against the GOP tax scam. And in the days and the weeks and the months to come, all of those reasons will be exposed for the American people in each and every one of your districts. But this bill represents a failed promise. Last year, Donald Trump and House Republicans spent all of their time talking about their promise to lower the high cost of living in the United States of America. In fact, Donald Trump and Republicans promised that costs would go down on day one. We're now more than 120 days past the inauguration. Costs aren't going down, they're going up. Inflation is out of control. Insurance rates remain stubbornly high. Our Moody's rating, our credit rating, has been downgraded. And you've got people losing confidence in this economy. Republicans are crashing this economy in real time and driving us toward a recession. But beyond that, costs are actually going up. The trade war that Donald Trump has recklessly launched, his tariff scheme, will raise the cost of goods and groceries and gas for everyday Americans, the Americans that you claimed you were going to help, but the Americans that you are clearly hurting. You've destabilized the business environment. Small businesses are at risk of closing. Farmers, small family farmers are in distress. Businesses can't invest. People are not hiring. You are actively crashing the economy, driving America toward a recession. You promise to lower costs on day one. Costs aren't going down, they are going up. Now, as House Democrats, we believe that we have to build an affordable economy for hardworking American taxpayers. We're committed to lowering housing costs and grocery costs and insurance costs and child care costs and utility costs. America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, there are far too many people living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet. Here in this country, no American should find themselves in that situation. And you promised that you would do something about it. But things are not getting better, they are getting worse. We could have partnered together to try to find a bipartisan path toward building an affordable economy for hardworking American taxpayers. But you chose to go it alone, to try to drive your extreme right-wing policies down the throats of the American people. And that's what this one big, ugly bill represents. Not simply a broken promise as it relates to your failures on the economy, and despite the gentleman from Louisiana trying to articulate all of the so-called successes that have taken place, we know that this presidency has already been a failure, filled with crisis and chaos, cruelty, and corruption. And the American people know it, which is why Donald Trump, at the 100-day mark, was the most unpopular president in American history. The American people understand. It's unfolding right before their eyes, no matter what kind of MAGA spin you try to put on the situation. And things are going to get worse. Why? Because of this big, ugly bill. Not simply an assault on the economy, a broken promise, it's an assault on the health care of the American people. You see, as Democrats, we believe in this country, health care is not simply a privilege, health care is a right. And from Medicare to Medicaid to the passage of the Affordable Care Act and subsequently enhancing it, we've begun to move America to a place where every single person in this land could have access to the health care that they need to live a life of dignity and respect. At this moment in America, we have the lowest rate of uninsured people in our nation's history. But this GOP tax scam will reverse that with this assault on health care, the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. And here's what it will mean for the American people. Children will get hurt. Women will get hurt. Older Americans who rely on Medicaid for nursing home care and for home care will get hurt. People with disabilities who rely on Medicaid to survive will get hurt. Hospitals in your districts will close. Nursing homes will shut down. And people will die. That's not hype. That's not hyperbole. That's not a hypothetical. The people that you all represent have been writing to us to make that clear. Thousands of people who've written to us, everyday Americans, have made that clear. And let me just present a few of those stories into the record. I have type 1 diabetes and was diagnosed when I was 7 years old. I've had jobs with private insurance in the past, but I lost my job during the pandemic. With childcare becoming a major challenge, it made more sense for me to stay home with the kids, but that also meant losing my health benefits. Right now, we're all on Medicaid. It's crucial for me to stay alive and healthy. I need insulin and supplies to manage my diabetes every single day. Without it, I could die. That's Shauna, who lives in Arizona's 6th congressional district. My youngest son has leukemia. He was a self-employed handyman, and therefore he didn't have sufficient insurance. When the cancer became more debilitating, he could no longer work. He has undergone radiation, stem cell transplant, and then more radiation. He is still fighting the cancer, and without Medicaid and the fine physicians, he would surely die. That's Greg, who lives in the 8th congressional district of Colorado. As a cancer survivor with chronic illnesses, I rely heavily on Medicaid and food stamps to get by. Without these essential programs, people like me would suffer. I'm currently taking expensive medication to stay in remission, but my condition and the side effects of my treatment make it impossible for me to work. Unfortunately, my work history also disqualifies me from receiving Social Security benefits. I'm not alone in my dependence on these Medicaid and food stamps benefits. Children, elders, and many others who are sick or struggling also rely on them to survive. I urge you to do the right thing for the people you represent. Without food stamps and Medicaid, the consequences would be painful and even deadly. That's Jalissa, who had a message for her representative in Pennsylvania's 8th congressional district. But we're here to say, as House Democrats, to Shauna, to Greg, and to Jalissa, that if your representatives won't fight for you, we will. We will. We will. If they won't fight for you, we will fight for you.
Well, you had 4 years to fight, and it seemed like you got fight now that President Trump is in charge.
For your grace and for your dignity. Now, in addition to visiting the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, that's not enough for the MAGA extremists. CBO has independently confirmed that this one big, ugly bill will also set in motion a $490 billion cut to Medicare in this country. Now, unfortunately, that should come as no surprise, because we know that our Republican colleagues for decades have been trying to attack Social Security, as they're doing right now, not necessarily in this bill. Why? Because the 1974 Budget Control Act prevents you from doing it. But you've been going after Social Security for a long time, going after Medicare for a long time, and Elon Musk, who seems to function as your puppet master, has made clear his intentions, which you just follow as if you work for him. Elon Musk wants to take a chainsaw to Social Security, a chainsaw to Medicare, as you're doing in this bill, a chainsaw to Medicaid, as you're doing in this bill. Here's our message to you and the American people: no matter how long it takes, House Democrats are going to take a chainsaw to Project 2025, because it's not in the best interests of the American people. And what this bill represents is your effort to try to put into law Project 2025. You acted like you didn't know anything about it. This is why you have no credibility right now. You spent all of last year lying to the American people, saying to them that you were going to lower the high cost of living. In fact, you're doing the exact opposite. At the same period of time, you acted like you knew nothing about Project 2025, and this bill is an effort to try to implement it into law. So you mentioned credibility issues. I think it exists on the right side of this chamber. Now, not only have you gone after Medicaid, not only have you gone after Medicare, in this,
you are to direct your comments to the chair.
Mr. Speaker, you know what's interesting is that every time I've come on this floor, I can use sharp language, he can use sharp language. You choose to admonish me. I don't work for you, sir. I work for the American people.
I understand. House will be in order. As I said, Mr. Leader, we've been very patient. Just listen to the majority leader of the other side, who directed all of his comments to the chair. It is important for the decorum of the institution for you to do the same. You may proceed.
We can continue this.
You may proceed.
And every time I'm interrupted, that's going to add another 15 minutes to my remarks.
Fair enough.
Mr. Speaker, so what we've seen is the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, an effort to devastate Medicare. And of course, what this bill also does is strip away some of the coverage provided by the Affordable Care Act. Millions of people will lose their coverage as a result of this GOP tax scam. And so when you aggregate the assault on health care that's taking place, what we're likely to see is at least 13.7 million people are going to lose their health care in the United States of America. That's what we're fighting for. That's why we're a no, amongst several other reasons, on this bill. It's an assault on the economy, an assault on health care. It's also an assault on nutritional assistance. Now, in the 1960s, the American people were shaken up and disturbed by images that they saw after some investigations exposed the conditions of some people in America who were dealing with intense hunger in rural America, in under-resourced communities, in communities of color, images of children with distended bellies, families rummaging through garbage in order to find food so they wouldn't starve. That's what eventually led to the creation of what is now the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. Because the American people concluded that in this great country, not a single child should ever go hungry. That's our position. Apparently, it's not the position of my Republican colleagues. Because in this bill, SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, will experience more than $300 billion in cuts, the largest cut to nutritional assistance in American history. Literally, Mr. Speaker, Republicans are taking food out of the mouths of children, disabled Americans, veterans, and older Americans. That is another reason why we are strongly opposed to this bill. This is the United States of America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world. It is indecent to rip food out of the mouths of children and everyday Americans. It is indecent. And to make matters worse, we know that as a result of this bill, according to an analysis from the Urban Institute, there are 18 million children
healthy. Hunger is kind of like having your own personal shopper and nutrition
of losing school meals. Decade after decade after decade in America, we've made great progress.
Hi, I'm Eva Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us. Today's testimony in the Sean Combs sex trafficking trial taking us inside Diddy's inner circle.
Is now at risk
Enterprises employee
of being
who also
rolled
worked
back.
as a personal assistant agreed
And one
to
of the
take
excuses
the stand
that I'm
against
sure
his
we'll
former
hear
boss, but only after
from
being granted immunity.
the Speaker of this
so far, telling the jury it was his
institution
job to clean up the rooms after
is that
freak-offs.
this one
Also
big ugly
tonight,
bill
our
is
first look
all about
inside Combs'
waste,
Miami
fraud,
mansion.
and
The day
abuse.
federal agents busted
It's
the gate
interesting
open
because
last year to raid
month
it.
after month
A federal
after
agent
month, we
testifying
continue to
about
hear
the evidence,
that
guns
phrase,
and
and
ammo
let's be
seized
clear,
from Diddy's
as
home that were
Democrats,
found near
we
alleged
believe
freak-off supplies,
in trying to
which
make sure
included
that federal
dozens of bottles of
taxpayer
baby
dollars
oil and
are
boxes
spent
of
in an
platform
efficient
peels,
and an
bondage
effective
restraints, and
way.
bundles of rope. Also
We're all
photographed
for
as
that.
evidence that day,
But that's not what's
motivational
being
messages
done
on Combs' bathroom
this bill.
mirror that included "You
No
a legend,"
evidence
an upward motion
of waste, fraud, and abuse
drugs
has been
Lots of
presented
drugs,
in a
including ones found in
compelling
supplies
way.
which included dozens
In
of
fact,
bottles of baby oil
you know
and
what's interesting?
boxes of platform
You're
peels,
talking about
bondage restraints,
taking away
and bundles
nutritional
of rope.
benefits
Also photographed as evidence that
that
day,
amount to
motivational
$2
messages on
per meal.
Combs' bathroom mirror that
$6
included "You a legend"
per day.
an upward motion.
At the same time,
and
when
drugs.
Elon Musk
Lots of drugs,
and his
including
federal
ones found in
contracts
plastic bags
are worth
inside a Gucci bag,
$8
and
million
orange tablets with the
a day.
Tesla logo that tested
If you're
positive
trying to find
for
waste,
ecstasy.
fraud, and abuse,
Combs has
I
pleaded
have
not
a
guilty to all
suggestion.
allegations in
Start
this case.
right
A
there.
former FBI special agent
Start
will join
right
us
there.
to break down what it
Don't
takes
take
to carry
food
out a raid like this.
from the mouths
Plus, a
of our
former
children.
assistant warden is here live with what
Start
Combs'
right
life
there.
behind bars might look like. But first, Let's get right to our chief investigative correspondent, Aaron Katursky, outside the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan.
GOP
Aaron,
tax scam.
That special agent was on the stand today testifying about what was found at Combs' Miami Beach property.
On the economy. It's an assault on health care.
Well, you started to list it, Eva. The guns, the drugs, the freak-off supplies. And I think what was most striking, perhaps, for the jury to see was the proximity. There were the AR-15 style assault rifles.
That is the largest
right in the same shelving unit as the baby oil and the Astroglide
in American
and
history.
The platform
coupled
heels
by the largest
and the
cuts in
lingerie.
nutritional
And
assistance
then in another part of the house,
in
there was
American
the loaded
history.
.45 caliber
in order to
handgun that
enact
was
the
found
largest
in a
tax
red
break
suitcase.
for billionaires
All of this was being
in
kept
American
by
history.
Combs. For what reason, we
That's
don't know.
unacceptable.
But federal prosecutors,
That's
I think, are
unconscionable,
hoping to
and
make
that's
a link,
un-American.
especially between the guns
That's un-American.
and the freak-offs, because their whole theory of the case is that Combs used violence
because
and
my
the
Republican
threat of
colleagues
violence to
promised
coerce women,
that
particularly
they would actually
Cassie Ventura,
focus their efforts
but other women as well, into these
on
sexual
trying to
performances.
make life better.
Aaron, was there any reaction to this evidence inside the courtroom?
But disproportionately,
the jury, I think, was interested in seeing the weapons, particularly the .45 caliber handgun. The special agent from Homeland Security Investigations picked up and paraded in front of the jury box.
at the lower end of the
drugs seemed less
socioeconomic
interesting
spectrum.
to the jury,
They actually
but
go
they did see
disproportionately
quite a
to
lot of
those
them,
at the
including you
highest
mentioned the
end
Tesla logoed ecstasy. There were other drugs found in a box, a
CBO
wooden
analysis
box on the bathroom sink.
requested
it had
by
a gold
Congressman Boyle and myself just
puppy.
Confirmed.
The jury also heard today
Not
from psychologist Dawn Hughes, who
Not
specializes
hyperbole,
in
not a
sex
hypothetical.
trauma. What did she say?
What will happen if this one
There's something
big
so
ugly
voyeuristic
bill
about this entire trial, this
became
lurid
law?
look into the private and
so it's an
often
assault
violent sex life of
on
Sean
tax
Combs and Cassie
fairness.
Ventura so far. And
of
what
course
Dawn
that's
Hughes did was firmly
coupled
ground it in
the
trauma,
assault
in psychological principles
fiscal
about trauma,
responsibility.
domestic violence.
It's ironic to
and
me that
sexual
many of my
abuse.
colleagues
And
on the
she
other
could
side
not
of the aisle
testify about the
claim
specifics. Expert
to be the
witnesses are
party
not
of fiscal
allowed
responsibility.
to clinically examine a witness
But
or
as
a
Richie
victim
Nail has
or
often
the defendant.
eloquently articulated,
But generally, she talked about
that's not what the
why
record
abuse
shows.
victims stay in abusive
The record
relationships
shows something
and how they cope
very
with the
different.
abuse. And some of the things
And
that
this
she
fiscal
described
irresponsibility that comes
mimicked
from the other side of the
testimony
aisle
of Cassie Ventura
is
and
actually
others.
connected
How
to the
she felt
obsession
like she
with
couldn't get out
massive
of the relationship
tax
because
cuts
he controlled
for
her
the wealthy,
finances.
the
Her friend
well-off,
Carrie Morgan
and
and,
the
Dawn
well-connected.
Richard both mentioned how
We've seen
during a
this
beating that
rinse
Combs
and
would inflict
repeat
that
scenario
they said they witnessed,
play
she
itself
would
out
curl up in a
over
fetal
and
position.
over and over
About the show
again.
and tell that the jury got today.
President
That
Reagan
special
comes
agent
in
was part of the Miami
to
raid.
office.
They brought in the
And
evidence.
what is his signature
Why not just show the jury
domestic
pictures?
priority? His signature
picture is worth
domestic
1,000 words.
priority,
Seeing it
massive
physically yourself is a lot
tax cuts
different.
for
Don't
the
forget,
super
we are in the Southern District of New
wealthy.
York. Many of the jurors
And as
are
a result,
either from Manhattan,
he
they are
escalates
in Westchester or the
debt
Bronx. And so seeing a physical gun and
deficit.
understanding
Those
what
policies,
it is,
of course,
the
are
size of it.
continued
I know we were talking before. I don't think they're going
by
to have
his
to hold the
successor,
guns themselves. But
President
seeing it is one
George
thing. But the
H.W.
defense really
Bush.
pushed back on this idea because don't forget,
then
this is a very
President
large
Clinton
home and
takes
compound,
office.
trying to make the argument that, you know
And
what,
in
other
his
people
8
work
years,
and live here. Maybe Sean
turns
Combs
a
doesn't possess
deficit
these, even though some of the serial numbers are scratched
into a
off.
budget surplus.
The other thing that was kind of surprising,
That's fiscal
waking up this morning,
responsibility.
rapper Kid Cudi was expected to testify today.
And then after 8
but
years
apparently
in
there was a
office,
note sent last night to the judge signaling
President Clinton is
otherwise.
replaced
It's like a late night note.
by
Are we
President
going to hear
George
from him? What happened
W.
here?
Bush.
The idea is we still are going to hear from
proceeds
Kid
to
Cudi.
follow
Don't
the
forget,
same
Cassie's civil
playbook.
lawsuit, there was a relationship between the two for a
used to
period
call
of
it
time.
trickle-down
There's
economics.
also
The
from
American
Cassie's
people aren't
lawsuit and
buying
from the
it.
indictment itself that Kid Cudi
Because they figured out what
allegations
trickle-down
are connected to the
economics
racketeering
means.
conspiracy,
We make it a
specifically
trickle,
arson.
but
and
we're
we know
guaranteed
that
to
Kid
stay
Cudi
down.
did come out to the New York Times in 2023,
And that's what's happened
saying it's
over and
all
over
true in reference to Cassie's
and over
civil
again.
lawsuit, where she claimed that
President
Sean
Bush
Combs threatened to
comes
blow up
into
Kid
office,
Cudi's vehicle and
and
wanted
what
his
does he
friends
do?
present to see it
Massive
as a way of controlling and
tax
using
cuts
force
for the
to
wealthy,
keep
the
Cassie
well-off,
close to him.
and the
We'll have to
well-connected.
wait and watch for that
The
testimony. Brian Buckmeyer, thank you so
2001
much.
tax
We learned
cuts,
a
the
lot about the raid of
2003
Diddy's
tax
Miami
cuts,
home. Let's bring in
turned
ABC
a
News
budget
contributor and
surplus
former FBI special agent
into
in
a
charge,
massive
Richard Frankel. You worked for
deficit.
the Bureau for 20 years, supervised
and then further
and executed
exacerbated
many FBI
the problem
raids.
with a failed
and
war
I
in
want to point
Iraq
out
and a
that you were
failed
not
war in
involved in
Afghanistan,
any raids
asleep at the
involving
switch
Sean Combs.
as it related
but just walk us through how something like
economy,
this goes down. Once a
which
judge signs
resulted
off on a raid, what happens next?
in the Great Recession.
Well, actually, the judge doesn't
President
specifically sign off on the
Obama
raid.
takes office
He will
to once again demonstrate what fiscal
The government
responsibility
actually released images and maps
is all
of
about.
Diddy's home. Is that a typical part
And
of
in
the
8
planning?
years takes the
you're going to have
deficit
maps
that he
you're going to have
inherited
maps not only of that area, but you're going to have
of
maps going to
$1.5 trillion
the courthouse, if that's where you're
and
going to be
cuts
bringing
it
people to
by
after
$1
it's an
trillion.
arrest. You're going to have maps
Notwithstanding
to a
the
hospital
economic
in case
mess
somebody's
that he
injured, and
inherited.
then you're going to have an overall map of the area so
Having
that you know
to dig the
where you're
country
going in.
out
You're going to have all those
the great
4 sides of a location
recession.
marked, because you may have people doing entry
And
on
then,
the
of
front.
course, after 8
you may have
years
people at the back door
of
and on the
President
side doors, and then you're going to
Obama,
have people
which brings
around
us
the
to
perimeter to make sure
the current
that no one either gets
administration
into the perimeter
in its first
or out of the
term.
perimeter.
A lot of planning, it seems, goes
As
on.
my colleague from
Today, the jurors saw some
Louisiana talked
images of
about,
what was inside Diddy's home, including seeing the
what's your
guns and the
signature
drugs.
legislative
Once those
accomplishment?
agents are in the house,
The
how do they go
2017
through
version
everything?
of the GOP tax scam.
Well, you
Whereby
do it
some
in a very
estimates,
systematic
83%
manner.
of
You're
the
not going in there
benefits
and just going
were
through
set
one
in
room
motion
and just
for the
checking things.
wealthiest
You're going to have somebody who's
1%,
in
and you
charge of the
borrow
execution of the
more
search
than
warrant,
$2
and that person is going to make sure that
trillion
you go from room to
do it.
room, and that you cover every part
Once
of
again,
that search warrant to
exploding
make sure that you've looked in
the
every
debt
spot. And as you go
and the
through it,
deficit
you're going to have people with,
in the United
with
States of
forms,
America.
with paper, that are going to fill
President
out what's been found
Biden
in the
comes
room,
into
where
office
it's
in his
been found.
first
You're going to have
2 years,
photographers.
notwithstanding
you're going to have
all
other
of the
people just
signature
overwatching
accomplishments,
the area,
many of which
to be
did
able to,
have some
swear
bipartisan
that something was found in a certain location.
support, particularly
So it's
in the
it's
Senate.
a very intricate search,
Significant
especially when you're doing a search of this nature.
accomplishments led by
when you
President
talk about a search of this nature, this
Biden,
extremely high-profile target like Sean Combs.
Speaker
how does
Pelosi,
that
Democrats
impact how you
in the
guys
House,
do things?
partnering with our colleagues in the Senate,
Well,
notwithstanding
the
all of
goal
those
is that you do
accomplishments,
every search
reduces
the
the
same
deficit
way.
in its first 2
But
years
the fact that
by
it was Sean Combs,
$1.7
you're going to make sure that you are dotting the
trillion.
I's, crossing the T's,
That's
that
what
you may have
fiscal
extra people there
responsibility
because
looks like.
it's expected that
So
this
we're not
is going to
gonna
go
be
to trial.
lectured
And also because of the
on
size
this
of the
issue.
location, you're going to have to
And
make sure that
then
you are going through
my
each room
colleagues
and
have the
checking
nerve
every nook and cranny.
talk about
in
fiscal
other searches,
responsibility,
you may have an idea of where something is,
to try to
or it's
pass
just
a
small
bill
location.
that
But
disproportionately
in this
benefits
instance,
their billionaire
it was a very
donors
large residence,
like
and
Elon
you had a
Musk.
lot of area to cover.
And
during that time, you
borrows
playing
will add
What's the worst part of
to the
doing
debt
keto?
more than
meal
$5
prep.
trillion.
Come in, children.
That's an assault
The
on
prosecutor,
fiscal
Bernardo, let's start with
responsibility.
you. The evidence that
That is forcing our children and our grandchildren, all
because there's no allegation
them
that he possessed a gun
shoulder
in indictment.
Well, let's
an
talk about those guns a
unnecessary
little bit, because they
burden
were
that will limit their ability to fully experience the American
gone
dream.
down substantially. In
And so that's
2019, Forbes had him at about
why we oppose this bill. An assault on the economy, an assault on health care, an assault on nutritional assistance, including on our veterans, an assault on tax fairness, and an assault on fiscal responsibility. As I close, let me make one other observation. I do believe that there are people of faith on both sides of this chamber. Authentically, people of faith on both sides of this chamber. I'm not one to question anyone's faith. But I do think we have to ask the question, particularly when you study the gospel, and the gospel in particular of Matthew 25 and 35 through 40, where Jesus talks about the importance of standing up for the least, the lost, the left behind, the poor, the sick, the afflicted, the homeless, the people who are confined, strangers in a foreign land. That when you know the gospel, when you are charged with trying to live the gospel, it cannot be the case that one goes to synagogue, or one goes to the mosque, or one goes to church, as I do, but one goes to church to pray on Sunday, and then comes to Washington, D.C. to pray on the American people the rest of the week. P-R-E-Y. Can't pray on the poor, pray on the sick, pray on the afflicted, pray on our children, pray on people with disabilities, pray on our veterans who serve this country, and project that that is consistent with the faith that I at least know, anchored in Matthew 25 and 35. So, Mr. Speaker, I think this, in some ways, is a sad day here for this institution. James Madison, one of our great thinkers, I believe it was in Federalist 51, talks about Congress at its best should function as a rival to the executive branch, serve as a check and balance on the out-of-control impulses of an executive that may emerge from time to time. Congress, according to James Madison, at its best, would serve as a rival to the executive branch. But unfortunately, our House Republican colleagues haven't followed the vision of this Madisonian version of democracy because you have consistently proven to be nothing more than a rubber stamp for Donald Trump's extreme agenda. And the American people are paying attention. The American people are paying attention. So I think that when the story is told of the 119th Congress, when the votes are ultimately cast on that first Tuesday in November next year, that this day may very well turn out to be the day that House Republicans lost control of the United States House of Representatives. Because the American people are paying attention. They are smarter than you think. And they know when they are being hurt. They know when their interests are not being served. And they know when they have been lied to and deceived. You see, they know that Congress was meant to be a separate and co-equal branch of government. We don't work for President Trump. We don't
Yeah, like I said earlier, folks, I'm sorry. I apologize. My computer's old, and I think my computer's got too hot, and it then ran out of time. So I apologize. I'm gonna have to. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Well, thank you for sticking with me this long. Tomorrow I'll try to come on with some other details and highlights about our great President Trump and the Republican Party. Please subscribe. Thank you.